Chapter 1400. Her eyes flickered, and following his gaze, she saw a white figure riding a flying sword towards the cave behind. That figure was graceful and delicate, and her white clothes were elegant and serene. Coupled with her outstanding appearance, she could not help but make people's eyes light up. "Ah! Martial Aunt Shangwan is back," she said in surprise. After seeing that the figure had disappeared, she came back to her senses and looked at Senior Brother Hu in front of her. A dark light flashed through her eyes, and she said, "Senior Brother Hu, I have to go deliver the herbs. Let's have a good chat when we have time. I'll be leaving first." Fengjiu said as he waved his hand, then turned and left, walking in the direction behind. That was her mother. Looking at her up close, she was even clearer. However, he seemed to have become a little colder, like a pool of stagnant water without any ripples, giving people a feeling of deathly stillness and coldness. Seeing her like that, her heart ached slightly. She must have missed her and her father so much. However, now that she was here, and she was also the last disciple of 3 Yangzi, if she said she wanted to go out of the sect to gain experience, she should be allowed. This way, she could go to the Phoenix dynasty to see them. However, looking at her, it seemed like, her heart was filled with doubts, and she walked briskly towards the back. When she arrived in front of the cave, her figure was already gone. She stood outside the cave and hesitated for a moment. "Martial Aunt Shangwan, Martial Aunt Shangwan, I'm a disciple who came to deliver the herbs." She raised her voice and shouted twice. She nervously looked at the Immortal's cave. Perhaps her voice had reached the Immortal's cave. Not long after, the enchantment in front of the Immortal's cave dispersed. Shangwan Wanrong's indifferent voice came from inside. "Come in." Fengjiu was delighted. Just as he was about to step in, he suddenly saw another person beside him. He turned his head to look, and his expression stiffened. "Senior Brother Hu. Why are you here? What was this person doing here? This was not his master's cave. I obtained some spirit fruits a few days ago, so I'm bringing some over for Martial Aunt Shangwan." He looked inside the cave and said, "Spirit fruits? You can give them to me and bring them to Martial Aunt Shangwan." At this time, Fengjiu finally noticed that he was carrying a basket with a few fruits in it. "How can that be? That's too rude." As he spoke, his gaze swept over Fengjiu. "All right, let's go. Don't be long-winded here." As he said that, he walked in first. Fengjiu behind him helplessly, he glanced at Senior Brother Hu, and could only follow him in. At this time, if she still couldn't see through Senior Brother Hu's intentions. However, Senior Shangwan Wanru, Senior Brother Hu, Shangwan Wanru, Shangwan Wanru, Shangwan Wanru, Shangwan Wanru, and Shangwan Wanru. She cast a sidelong glance at Senior Martial Brother Hu was excitedly walking inside. She put away her expression and walked inside with a grin on her face. When she entered the cave, she saw a white figure sitting at the stone table drinking tea. Her expression was indifferent, as if she didn't care about anything. Even when they came in, she didn't raise her eyes to look at them. She only indifferently said, "Just put the spirit herbs on the shelf." "Greetings, Martial Aunt Shangwan." Senior Brother Hu put on an act and bowed, and said with a fawning expression, "Martial Aunt Shangwan, it's me. We've met once before." Chapter 1401. Shangwan Wanrong glanced at him and frowned. She said indifferently, "There's no need. Take your things and leave." She directly asked him to leave without giving him any face. Senior Hu's expression stiffened and he looked as if he couldn't get out of the situation. "Martial Aunt Shangwan. Get out." Bang! This time, his voice was even colder. He slammed his hand heavily on the stone table, causing a loud bang. Fengjiu, who was standing at the side, had been paying attention. When he saw the wound on her wrist when she slammed the table, his eyes flashed and his expression changed. Wound? How could there be a wound? She was in 3 Yang Peak and she was the direct disciple of 3 Yangzi. How could there be a wound on her body? Her gaze was fixed on her wrist. That wound seemed to be new. Moreover, it looked like a whip wound, but it didn't really look like a whip wound. Just as she was thinking, she saw Senior whose face darkened because he couldn't get out of the situation. He picked up the basket and said in a slightly angry tone, "I've disturbed Martial Ant. I'll leave now." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. He even stopped and glanced at Fengjiu. "Why are you still standing there like an idiot? Put down the spiritual herbs and come out with me." Ah! But it wasn't easy for her to come here. How could she leave just like that? "Give me the herbs." A voice was heard. Fengjiu looked up and saw his mother standing in front of him. His lips moved slightly and he wanted to call out, "Mother," but he forced himself to hold it back. She gathered her thoughts and stared straight into Senior Hu's eyes. A smile bloomed on her face and her voice was clear and cheerful as she said, "Martial Ant, my name is Fengjiu. Your surname is Feng." She was slightly startled as she looked at the young man who had a pure smile on his face. She saw the young man's clear and bright eyes looking at her. She saw the strange look of admiration in his eyes and her heart couldn't help but tremble. She only felt that this young man gave her an inexplicably strange feeling. He was clearly someone she hadn't met before, but she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. This feeling made her indifferent and cold expression warm up a little. Her entire face also softened. Her surname was Feng. Such a familiar yet distant surname. "Yes, my surname is Feng. Senior Gua had something to do and left the mountain, so it's my turn to deliver the herbs." She had the urge to tell her that her father's name was Feng Xiao, but she was afraid that she would be caught off guard and shock her. Moreover, why was there a new wound on her hand? She had to investigate this matter thoroughly. "And, let's go," she said and took the medicine basket from Fengjiu. "Yes." She bowed and replied. After taking a deep look at her, she turned and walked out. She told herself that there was no need to rush. There was no need to rush to reunite with her mother. They were both at 3 Yang Peak, so there would be plenty of opportunities. The two of them walked outside, and the barrier was activated again, isolating them from the outside world. After walking out, Fengjiu turned around to take a look and heard the man's surname whose strange voice. "Uncle Master Shengguan's attitude towards you seems to be better than mine." Hearing this, Fengjiu was startled. Her expression immediately turned cold. How could that be? "Senior Martial Brother Hu, you're thinking too much. This is the first time I've seen Martial Uncle Shengguan, and I'm just an errand boy." Martial Uncle Shengguan only asked one more question because he was curious why the person who delivered the medicine was changed. Chapter 1402. Hearing those words, Fengjiu watched as the man with the surname who left. The corners of her mouth twitched, revealing a strange smile. She reached out her hand and flicked her sleeve, only to see a dust-like powder fall to the ground and disappear without a trace. On her way back, she went to exchange for her reward, then returned to the mountain peak to deliver medicinal ingredients for everyone. Just like that, a busy day passed. In the evening, when she was on her way back to the cave residence, she saw Senior Gua, who had just returned, walking towards her with a smile. "Fengjiu, thank you for delivering the medicinal ingredients for me today. Come, this is what I brought back for you." As he spoke, he handed her a basket with an oiled paper bag. Before Fengjiu opened it, she smelled the fragrance and her eyes couldn't help but brighten. She said in surprise, "Senior Gua, is this roasted chicken?" "Haha, that's right. The people on the mountain are not greedy. You, on the other hand, don't eat the fasting pills and only like to eat these things. I can't afford those spiritual animals, but I can buy this roast chicken for you. Senior Gua, you really understand my heart. Thank you, this is really the best thing." She said happily, then asked, did Senior Gua just come back? Do you want to come to my place for a drink or two? Oh. You still have wine? He was a little surprised. Yes, a Senior Gua gave it to me a few days ago, there's a big jar. I didn't drink it. She grinned, since there's roasted chicken, it'll go well with wine. What's more, it's time to eat. If that's the case, then alright, we'll go to your place to drink. Let's go. He nodded with a smile and walked with her to the cave residence. In the cave residence, the two drank wine and ate roasted chicken at the stone table while chatting. From the initial sobriety to drunkenness, they drank a third of the jar of wine. Come, continue drinking, let's finish this cup. As Fengjiu spoke, she raised her cup and drank another mouthful of wine, then poured more wine for him. Looking at the drunk Senior Gua, Fengjiu grinned, Gua, Senior Gua, you're drunk. How is that possible? I'm not drunk, not drunk. Come on, let's continue drinking. He waved his hand, but his eyes were blurry, his face was red, and his words were slurred. It was obvious that he was drunk. Seeing this, Fengjiu said casually, Senior Martial Brother Gua, Grandmaster Three Sons really treats Martial Uncle Shangguan very well. The cave she lives in is much bigger than the one we live in. Well, it's good to say that, but you're new here, so you don't know. The last disciple, they only talk about it verbally. There's no ceremony, and, he burped and continued, the few of us who send the pills to the peak all know that Ancestral Master Three Sons is very strict. If he is not satisfied with the pills refined by the 5 martial uncles, he will even punish them. Ah. Is that so? Wouldn't he be beaten if he was punished? She said in astonishment, only to see him shaking his head drowsily. Not long after, his entire body fell to the ground. Senior Martial Brother Gua. She called out and pushed him. Seeing that he had fallen asleep, she could only sigh and let him sleep. Chapter 1403. The next morning, Fengjiu went to work because Senior Guo was still hungover. As soon as she entered the courtyard, the fat manager greeted her with a smile, I knew you'd be the first one to come. Come here, come here. Good morning, manager. She stepped forward with an obedient look and bowed respectfully. Then, she looked at the fat manager with a smile. All right, you went to the 8th summit yesterday. Here, this is the spiritual medicine that the 8th summit's martial uncle Duan needs. Go get it and quickly send it to him. He handed a piece of paper with the spiritual medicine written on it to Fengjiu. When Fengjiu heard this, she happily replied, all right. She could go to the 8th summit early in the morning and see if she could meet her mother. Thinking about this, she looked at the fat manager who had turned around to do other things. Her eyes flashed as she went forward and said, Manager, let me deliver all the spiritual medicine on the 8th summit in the future. I can take over everyone else's work. This way, the other senior brothers won't have to be so busy. Hearing this, the fat manager paused for a moment and turned around to look at him. He nodded, that's fine too. Although you haven't been here for long, you haven't made any mistakes. Especially when the uncle masters of the 8th summit want to use medicine, you can't make any mistakes. Alright then. From now on, you'll only be in charge of the spiritual medicine on the 8th summit. Thank you, manager. She happily thanked him. The fat manager smiled and didn't mind. From the 3rd summit to the 8th summit, there were times when they had to go back and forth. The other servants would sometimes complain that it was too tiring to go up and down. This kid, on the other hand, was very happy. After the manager left, Fengjiu hummed a little tune as she went to get the spiritual medicine. She placed the spiritual medicine in the basket and checked it again. After confirming that there were no mistakes, she went to the 8th summit. She arrived at the first cave abode on the 8th summit with great familiarity. She shouted from outside and saw senior brother who from yesterday walk out with an ugly expression. When she saw him, her eyes flickered and the corners of her lips curled up. "Good morning, Senior Hu. You're really diligent. It's so early in the morning and you're already busy." Her voice was clear and she said with a smile. Senior Hu heard the voice and saw that it was Fengjiu. He couldn't help but frown. "Why are you here to deliver spiritual medicine again? Where are the others?" It was the same kid yesterday, and it was the same kid today. Fengjiu looked at him and didn't answer. Instead, he exclaimed, "Ah! Senior brother Hu, what happened to your eyes and lips?" His left eye and lips were red and swollen, as if they were blisters. His entire face was extremely ugly due to the swelling of his eyes and lips. If it wasn't for his dark face, it would have been even more comical. Upon hearing this, Senior Marshal Brother Hu's expression stiffened and he evaded Fengjiu's bewildered gaze. He said in a deep voice, "It's nothing. It's just that my virtual fire has risen a little." What was the rise of virtual fire? How could she not know what she had done? It was clearly a flare-up of heat toxins, and it would have swollen for at least 10 days. It was impossible for him to recover after 10 days of pain. Who told him to keep looking around? If he didn't teach him a lesson, he wouldn't know his place. Although she thought this in her heart, her face was full of admiration. It must be because Senior Apprentice Brother Hu was too busy and didn't rest well. A disciple like Senior Apprentice Brother Hu is really a role model for my generation. Senior Brother Hu glanced at Fengjiu when he heard that. Only then did his expression soften. "All right, give me the herbs." As he spoke, he tossed out a bottle. Chapter 1404. Fengjiu took it and thanked him happily. "Thank you, Senior Brother Hu." Go ahead." He waved his hand and signaled for Fengjiu to leave. "I'll take my leave first." With that, she turned around and left. After she left the cave, she could not help but look at the cave at the back and thought, "I wonder what my mother is doing." Just as she was about to take a look, she heard the voice of the man with the surname Hu. "Why are you still standing there? The people living on the 8th peak are all martial uncles. You're just a lowly servant, don't offend them. Quickly go back after you're done delivering the herbs." "Yes." She raised her voice in response before walking away. As she walked back and passed by the 7th peak, she heard a surprised voice. Aren't you that? What's your name again?" "Foam what?" She turned her head and saw that it was Chen Dao. She went forward and bowed. "Fengjiu greets Senior Brother Chen." Yes, it's Fengjiu." Chen Dao laughed and looked Fengjiu up and down. He asked, "Where did you go to deliver the herbs? Are you used to this task?" Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, "I'm used to it, too used to it." "It's good that you're used to it." He nodded. Seeing that Fengjiu's basket was empty, he asked, "Are you done delivering the herbs? Do you still need to go back?" "The steward told me to only deliver the herbs on the 8th peak. I just went to the 8th peak to deliver the spiritual herbs, so I'm free now." With that, she paused and asked, "Is there something you need, Senior Brother Chen?" He nodded, and said, "Since you're free, come with me to pick some spiritual herbs." As soon as he finished speaking, he strode forward, and motioned for Fengjiu to follow him. Seeing this, Fengjiu did not ask and followed him. When she saw that he had walked out of 3 Peak and went from the back of 3 Peak to the back of another peak, she curiously asked, "Senior Brother Chen, where are we going to pick the spiritual herbs? Are we walking on the back mountain path?" Why did she feel like she was sneaking around? "Don't ask so many questions. Just follow me." He didn't even turn his head as he continued to walk along the path. Seeing this, and thinking about the evaluation of Chen Dao in the peak, she suddenly felt like she had been led astray. Could it be that this fellow was thinking of bringing her along to do something bad? Thinking of this, she clutched her stomach and cried, "Ouch!" Chen Dao, who was in front, heard the noise behind him. He turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" "Senior Chen, my stomach hurts. Can I?" Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted. "Your stomach hurts? Why don't you settle it here and I'll wait for you in front?" "Settle it on the spot." Fengjiu was speechless as the corners of her mouth twitched. Seeing him staring at her with a faint smile, she sighed in her heart and said helplessly, "Well, there's no need." "No need? Really? Don't you have a stomachache?" "It's okay. Anyway, it's still early. I can wait for you." As he spoke, he stroked his funny mustache. There's really no need. It doesn't seem to hurt anymore," she said embarrassedly. "All right then. But if you have a stomachache or something else and want to go back first, you can tell me. I can help you settle it." Chapter 1405. Following him, they circled around to a bamboo forest. Only then did he stop and look around. She looked around and saw that it was just a bamboo forest without any spirit herbs. She couldn't help but ask, "Senior Marshal Brother Chen, is this the place where you said to gather herbs?" "Not bad, not bad. This is the place." He smiled and nodded. "But, there aren't even many weeds here. Where would the spirit herbs come from?" In this bamboo forest, other than the fallen bamboo leaves, there were only a few scattered weeds. Where would the spirit herbs come from? Bamboo heart water. Go and gather it. Hurry. He waved his hand as he walked like a cat with his back bent. It was unknown what he was looking for on the ground, but he also stared at the bamboo trees. His actions were strange. Bamboo heart water. She suddenly understood. That's right, bamboo heart water could also be used as medicine. Moreover, the bamboo in this bamboo forest was spirit bamboo. However, obtaining bamboo heart water was a bit troublesome. Generally speaking, if one wanted to obtain bamboo heart water, they had to chop down the bamboo to obtain the water. Moreover, they had to pick the earliest time in the morning so that the bamboo heart water wouldn't evaporate. However, if they were to chop down the spirit bamboo to obtain the water, wouldn't it alarm others? Just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard the rustling of bamboo leaves. She was startled and turned around to look. She saw that Qingdao had unknowingly jumped onto a bamboo. Thus, she shouted and asked, "Senior Marshal Brother Chen, are you going to chop down the spirit bamboo to obtain the water?" "That's right. I just chopped down to the bottom of the bamboo. Normally, the bamboo heart water is stored at the bottom section. Hurry and secretly chop down 2 or 3 pieces of bamboo. The bamboo heart water should be enough for me to use." Hearing this, she secretly sighed. As expected, he was here to secretly chop down the bamboo. Helpless, she looked around and saw that there was no one around. She picked through the bamboo forest and chose the largest and straightest bamboo. She took 2 steps back and condensed spirit chi in her palm. Aiming at the second to last section of the bamboo, she cut it. Xiao! The sharp sound of a blade of spirit chi was heard and a sharp cold light flashed. With a crisp sound, the largest and straightest bamboo slightly tilted to one side. Seeing this, she hurriedly went forward to support the bamboo and slightly moved it to the side. She used spirit chi in her hand to once again insert the cut bamboo into the ground. So, with a whoosh, the slightly slanted bamboo was once again inserted back into the ground. If it were not for the exposed bamboo head that had been cut off, one would not be able to tell that the bamboo had been secretly cut off. That'll do. She nodded her head in satisfaction. Then, she squatted to the side and sawed out the bottom section with a dagger. She then covered the exposed section with soil and stepped on it. Then, she continued to pick bamboo in the forest. He chopped off 3 of them in a row, using the same method. There was not the slightest trace of damage. She put away the bamboo water she had collected and looked around. Seeing that Chen Dao was still looking for something in the bamboo forest, she walked over. Senior brother Chen, I've collected the bamboo heart water. Are we going back now? Ah. Are you done? Hearing this, he turned to look at Fengjiu, then looked around. He did not see any bamboo that had been cut down, so he asked, You didn't even cut down the bamboo, so how did you collect it? I cut it down. I cut down 3 pieces of bamboo. Look. She smiled as she took out the bamboo heart water she had collected and handed it to him. Chapter 1406. I was worried that if the bamboo fell to the ground, it would cause too much of a commotion and people would find out that we were secretly cutting the spirit bamboo, so you planted it back. However, I don't think it will survive. She said rather helplessly. Taking only the bamboo heart water from a stalk of spirit bamboo was really a waste. Hearing this, Chen Dao was a little surprised. He looked around and didn't see anything different, so he asked, Where did you cut it? I'll go take a look. Over here. Fengjiu could only bring him over and pointed to him, just these few stalks. Chen Dao took a look and was stunned for a moment, then he laughed out loud, Not bad, not bad. Why didn't I think of this method before? I really didn't misjudge you. Letting you come with me was the right choice. This way, they won't know that we're secretly cutting the spirit bamboo, ha 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 ha. Fengjiu smiled embarrassedly and asked, Senior brother Chen, the bamboo heart water has been taken. Do you want it back? What's the rush? Since you're here, your senior brother naturally has to bring you something good. Come, follow me. As he spoke, he gestured for Fengjiu to follow behind him. He lightened his footsteps and walked towards the previous place. Fengjiu watched him search the bamboo and some weeds. She didn't know what he was looking for, so she asked, Senior brother Chen, what are you looking for? Do you need my help? Shoo. He put a finger to his lips and made a shushing gesture. In the next moment, he walked forward like a cat and suddenly took a deep breath. Ha ha ha, I finally caught it. It's so fat. I'm lucky today. Fengjiu looked at him and saw that he was holding a fat rat that weighed about 5 to 6 kilograms. The rat's grayish-black fur was prickly, and it was making squeaking sounds. Seeing this, the corner of her mouth twitched, and she took a step back. Senior brother Chen, why are you catching this rat? He's lucky. He can't be thinking of eating it, right? However, when she looked carefully, she realized that it wasn't a normal rat, but a bamboo spirit rat that fed on spirit bamboo. What rat? This isn't a rat, this is a bamboo spirit rat. It's very nourishing, you know. Moreover, this bamboo spirit rat meat is extremely delicious, and it's even better when roasted. You haven't eaten it before, but you'll know once you try it. He looked very excited and said excitedly, in the entire Danyang sect, only this spiritual bamboo forest has bamboo spirit rats. If you want to eat bamboo spirit rats, you have to come to this spiritual bamboo forest. However, bamboo spirit rats are not easy to catch. You see, it took me a long time to catch one. As he spoke, he weighed the bamboo spirit rat in his hand and chuckled. It's at least 5 to 6 catties. It looks quite fat, so it should be enough for both of us to eat. Hearing this, the corner of her mouth twitched. Alright, let's hurry up and find another place to roast this thing and eat it. He looked around and walked back. It's getting late. Although there's no one guarding this bamboo forest, if we roast something here, we'll definitely be discovered once the smoke rises. Let's go back to our territory. Therefore, Fengjiu was brought to another place just like this. When she came empty-handed, but when she left, she collected 3 tubes of bamboo heart water and even caught a big fat bamboo spirit rat. She could be considered to have returned from a rewarding journey. Chapter 1407. Senior Marshal Brother Chen, you're really good at roasting the bamboo spirit rat. It smells so good. Feng Jiu praised as she stared at the bamboo spirit rat roasting over the fire with sparkling eyes. At this moment, in her eyes, it was a fragrant piece of meat. Smelling the rich bamboo fragrance, her stomach could not help but growl. Of course, I've roasted it no less than 10 times. Smelling the fragrance of the meat, he stroked his funny mustache. Seeing that it was almost done roasting, he sprinkled some seasoning on it before taking it down and placing it on the big leaf. Come, come, have a taste. This thing is not easy to catch. He cut a piece and handed it to Fengjiu. He also cut a piece for himself to eat. Then, he took out wine from his chinquan bag and asked, "Do you want to drink some?" Fengjiu shook her head. "I'm not drinking. I have to go back and take a look later. I can't drink." Hearing this, Chen Dao did not force her. He only said, "I heard that a pill master wants you to become a pill disciple. Why didn't you go? Being a pill disciple is much better than being an errand boy." She took a bite of the meat. The tender, smooth, and fragrant taste made her eyes light up. She had a look of enjoyment on her face as she ate and said, "I can run around as an errand boy. It's more comfortable. I like it." "Since you like to run around so much, have you signed up for the herb gathering training team in the sex mystic realm in a month?" However, after saying this, he glanced at her and patted his forehead. "Look at my memory. You're only at the foundation establishment stage. That's something that only golden core cultivators can sign up for. However, if you beg me, I can take you along." As he spoke, he stroked his mustache and glanced at Fengjiu from the corner of his eyes. Hearing this, Fengjiu was stunned for a moment before she smiled. "Thank you for your kindness, Senior Martial Brother Chen. However, I still have to deliver spiritual herbs to the martial uncles of the 8th peak. I won't be going to this herb gathering training team." "Oh. You run around all day, but you don't know that the 5 disciples of Ancestral Master 3 Yangs will be going together this time. This is an order personally given by Ancestral Master 3 Yangs." "That's right. How would a mere errand boy like you know about this?" Fengjiu was stunned for a moment. The 5 martial uncles will be going together. Then wouldn't Martial Uncle Shangguan go with him? Was this experiential learning dangerous? I seem to have heard that Martial Uncle Shangguan's cultivation isn't very high. Upon hearing this, Chen Dao glanced at Fengjiu. "You seem to be paying special attention to this Uncle Master Shangguan." He. Fengjiu smiled embarrassedly. "That's because Grandmaster 3 Sons only has one female disciple, and she's so beautiful." Heh. I didn't expect you to be someone who likes beauty. But, for a woman who isn't strong, a beautiful face is a disaster." He shook his head and sighed. Fengjiu's eyes flashed when he heard this. How could that be? Martial Uncle Shangguan is the last disciple of Ancestral Master 3 Yangs. With such a strong background, who would dare to touch her? A woman's beauty will easily attract the attention of men and make them jealous. Do you think that Ancestral Master 3 Yang's disciples are all people who don't get close to women? 9 out of 10 men are lustful. It just so happens that I'm the 10th one. Upon hearing this, Fengjiu fell silent. Chapter 1408. Not hearing the praise he expected, he glanced at Fengjiu and said, "I'm talking to you. Why are you in a daze?" "Ah." Fengjiu regained her senses and looked at him blankly. "What?" Seeing this, Chen Dao shook his head and waved his hand. Nothing, continue to be in a daze. I'll eat meat." Saying that, he ignored him and picked up the bamboo spirit rat meat and ate it in big bites. "Senior Brother Chen, I suddenly remembered that I have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Next time, I'll look for you for a drink." Saying that, she stood up and patted her clothes to let the barbecued meat smell on her body dissipate. Go. He didn't even raise his head as he said. Fengjiu bowed and left. She didn't leave the seventh summit but headed towards Luo Heng's cave dwelling. Senior brother Luo. Senior brother Luo. She shouted a few times in front of Luo Heng's cave dwelling, and not long after, she saw a sleepy Luo Heng walking out. Fengjiu. It's you. Come in, come in. Luo Heng saw him and waved his hand, indicating for him to come in. Fengjiu followed in, and when he entered the cave dwelling, he saw him sitting by the stone table drinking water and asked, Senior brother Luo, you just woke up? Last night I refined a batch of pills and only slept when it was almost dawn. Saying that, he looked at him. Why did you come to find me? Is there something you need? Oh, it's like this. She also sat down at the table and started chatting. Then, she asked about the matter of gathering herbs and training. Finally, she beat around the bush and asked a few more questions. Around noon, she finally left the immortal's cave. After she left the cave dwelling, the smile on her face disappeared. Thinking about what she had heard from Luo Heng, her heart sank. It seemed that even though her mother was 3 Yangzi's last disciple, it wasn't easy for her to survive in this sect. That was true. Even though her alchemy cultivation wasn't bad, she couldn't compare to the people from the alchemy sect. Furthermore, she hadn't been in the sect for long, and didn't have a strong backing like the others. If 3 Yangzi didn't protect her, one could imagine her situation. Thinking about the scar on her mother's wrist yesterday, her eyes turned cold. Then, he walked back with big strides. Her mother shouldn't be bullied. A few days later. Ever since she came down from the 8th summit to deliver the spirit herbs, she would make 1 or 2 trips to the 8th summit almost every day. Although she had spent a lot of time on the 8th summit, other than the time she saw her mother, she didn't have the chance to see her again. It was the same for the other people from the 8th summit. They had seen the disciples in front of their cave abodes, but they had never seen the people inside. Just Luo Ling, Luo Luo's disciple, Luo Luo, Luo Fju, Fu Luo. She raised her head and saw a janitor disciple running towards her. She asked, "What's the matter? Have you finished sending the herbs to the 8th summit?" The disciple asked. I just finished and was about to go back." Luo nodded. "Oh, I see. Then come with me. Someone's looking for you." As he spoke, he led the way and asked Fengjiu to follow him. Seeing this, Fengjiu didn't say much and followed him all the way to a medicinal field at the back of the 7th summit. Luo saw that the disciple leading the way had stopped. She asked curiously, "Who's looking for me?" Chapter 1409. Fengjiu was stunned for a moment. She looked at the 5 or 6 people. 3 of them were servants, and their strength was in the foundation establishment realm. The other 3 looked like sect disciples based on the jade tokens on their waists, and their strength was in the golden core realm. The 6 of them and the servant who led the way made a total of 7 people. "Why are you looking for me?" she asked in a daze, her face full of confusion. One of them stepped forward and pushed her. "Brat, did you take on all the jobs on the 8th peak?" Fengjiu stumbled back, but her foot was tripped by another person's outstretched leg. She let out a cry of surprise and fell to the ground, looking at the 7 people surrounding her in shock. "Why are you bullying me?" she said with a bit of grievance. She lowered her eyes and put on a sad look. However, there was a flash of light in the depths of her eyes. She didn't bully anyone, so why did they bully her? She had been keeping a low profile recently, so why did they have to provoke her? "Take out the things. We know that you've been doing well in the various peaks recently. Many senior brothers who practice alchemy have rewarded you with many pills. I've already given the pills away." She raised her head and looked at the man who spoke. She remembered this person. He was a pill apprentice from the 6th peak. His alchemy skills were average. It was said that he had been in the sect for many years, but he couldn't even pass the alchemy test. You gave it away. Heh, who are you trying to fool? You're just an errand boy. Even if you gave away the pills, you would keep some for yourself. It's impossible for you to give them all away. He sneered and looked at Fengjiu, who was sitting on the ground with his arms crossed. He said impatiently, hurry up and take out the pills. Also, if you know what's good for you, go back and tell the steward to give up the job of delivering pills to the 8th peak. Otherwise, humph. At this moment, Fengjiu, who was sitting on the ground, was thinking, deal with them. I can't kill them. They're too troublesome. Beat them up. That didn't seem to work, because the strength she showed was only at Foundation Establishment. If a Foundation Establishment cultivator could really beat up a few Golden Core cultivators, the higher-ups would probably be alarmed. Should he just cover his head and let them beat and scold him? She wasn't willing to suffer such a loss. Give them some drugs. That was a good idea. At that moment, Fengjiu did not notice that in midair not too far away, a white figure was descending from the 9th summit on a sword and heading towards the 8th summit. However, when that figure inadvertently cast a glance at Fengjiu, who was sitting on the ground surrounded by 6 to 7 people, the figure paused for a moment. Shangguan Wanrong's beautiful brows slightly furrowed, and her beautiful eyes fell on the back of the mountain. She was only able to see it because she was standing on her sword and looking down. If she was below, no one would have noticed it. What made her stop was the young man who had fallen to the ground. Wasn't that the young man who had delivered the spirit medicine to her that day? Even in this kind of pill-refining sect, the weak were prey to the strong. That young man was only at Foundation Establishment and was only an errand boy. He should have been targeted and bullied by those people. This had nothing to do with her, and she shouldn't be meddling in other people's business. However, when she saw that young man being surrounded and sitting helplessly on the ground, her heart couldn't help but soften. She couldn't help but sigh softly, he's still just a child. Chapter 14:10. She wasn't by her child's side to protect her and accompany her as she grew up. She didn't know if Feng Xiao, whose memories had been sealed, had already married someone else after so many years. She didn't know if Feng Xiao had already married someone else. Would his wife treat her daughter well? Would she treat her daughter as her own? She didn't know if she was by her daughter's side, if her daughter was loved by anyone, if anyone bullied her daughter, if there were times when she was lonely and helpless. So many years had passed. She had been imprisoned in the Shangguan family and had no way of obtaining news from the outside world, let alone news about Feng Xiao and her daughter. But when she came here, alas. She sighed softly and turned to look down. Seeing that those people were approaching the young man, she flew down on her sword. I already said that I really don't have any more pills. I've really given them all away. Fengjiu said. Seeing that they had surrounded her one by one and were about to swing their fists, she hurriedly covered her head with both hands and shouted, "Ah! Don't hit me, I really don't have any more." Just as she was about to jump up and run away, she heard a clear voice. "Stop!" Hearing that clear voice, the 7 people turned around. When they saw that the person flying over on a sword was actually Martial Uncle Shangguan, one of their faces changed and they fled. Fengjiu was stunned for a moment. They left just like that. She was still thinking about what kind of medicine to give them. It was too easy for them. "Are you all right?" A soft voice with a trace of gentleness sounded. She was startled when she heard it and turned her head slightly to look. She couldn't help but be startled when she saw who it was. She was dressed in white and standing in front of her with her back to the light. There was a gentle smile on her beautiful and outstanding face, making her appear very amiable and gentle. That pair of beautiful eyes were staring at her with concern, causing her heart to skip a beat. A warm current flowed through her heart and she had the impulse to call out, "Mother." This was the familial love and longing in her bloodline. Even if she had only become Feng Qingge halfway through her life, even if she was a cold-hearted person to begin with, in the depths of her heart, she still longed for the warmth of familial love. She longed for the warmth of her family. It was also because of this that she had the heart to become stronger. She wanted to protect them, protect the family that had given her warmth and affection. Right now, when she was being bullied by a few disciples, her mother, who had suddenly appeared in front of her and chased those people away from her, inexplicably made her feel warmth and bitterness in her heart. Even if she didn't know that she was her daughter, even if she was just doing it casually, to her, it felt like she was being protected by her family. Mother, do you know that the person in front of you is your daughter? Do you know that I came to the sect to look for you? Do you know how much I want to call you mother? How much do you want to see your family reunited? Seeing the youth sitting on the ground with reddened eyes staring at her, Shangwan Wanrong couldn't help but ask with concern, what's wrong? Was he injured somewhere? Did they hit you? Where are you hurt? Hearing her question, Fengjiu, who was sitting on the ground, shook his head, no, they didn't have time to hit me before I fell. Hearing this, Shangwan Wanrong sighed in relief and smiled, that's good. I saw that your eyes were reddened and thought that they had hit you. Chapter 14:11. Hearing this, Shangwan Wanrong couldn't help but stare blankly. She looked at the youth who had fallen to the ground and heard him say that he missed his mother. She couldn't help but think, would her daughter also miss her? However, as soon as this thought appeared, a trace of sadness flashed through her beautiful eyes. Feng Zhao's memories had been sealed, so he already didn't remember anything about her. How could their daughter know of her existence? You should quickly return. I'm avoiding those people, she said slowly. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she saw the youth who had just stood up from the ground. His palms had been scraped by the sand and stones on the ground, so she took out a bottle of medicine from her sleeve. This is for you to take back and bandage the wound on your hand. It'll heal faster. Hearing this, Fengjiu took it, but before he could thank her, he saw her turn around and jump onto her flying sword. Thus, he hastily shouted, Martial Uncle Shangwan, please wait a moment. Shangwan Wanrong turned around and glanced at Fengjiu, asking, is there something else? Many thanks for the medicine, Martial Uncle Shangwan, she bowed to express her thanks, then asked, will Martial Uncle Shangwan also go to the herb-gathering training in the secret realm? Master has ordered us 5 disciples to go together. When the time comes, I'll naturally have to enter the secret realm. As she said this, she looked at Fengjiu below and said, the lowest cultivation level to enter the secret realm is core formation stage. You're only in the foundation building stage, so you won't be able to go. After saying this, she no longer spoke and flew away on her flying sword. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and looked at the departing figure, softly muttering, Mother, I've already been a nascent soul cultivator for a long time. In the following days, she continued to deliver elixirs to the 8th summit as usual. If the 8th summit didn't need them, she would go to Qingdao. Compared to other alchemists who were busy preparing for the mystic territory, Qingdao still slept until noon every day. He would only start refining pills when he was in the mood. Occasionally, when he was in a good mood, he would even invite Fengjiu to drink together in the evening. When he got to know Fengjiu, he did not look down on him because Fengjiu was an odd-job worker or an errand boy. It was only because they got along well with each other and he saw that Fengjiu, this junior, had a crafty, straightforward, and interesting temperament. Most of the time, when he could help, he would lend a helping hand. Take this trip to the secret realm for example. That evening, Fengjiu secretly caught a bamboo spirit beast. After roasting it, he brought it to Qingdao's cave. Senior Brother Qin. Senior Brother Qin. Look at what good stuff I've brought. She shouted outside the cave. Qingdao, who was inside, heard her and opened the enchantment. Come in. Seeing that the enchantment was opened, Fengjiu quickly walked in. The moment he entered, he saw Qingdao, who was filling bottles and jars, take a deep breath. He raised his head and looked at Fengjiu with bright eyes. isn't this the fragrance of the bamboo spirit meat? It's also emitting the fragrance of bamboo. Brat, did you secretly catch a bamboo spirit rat again? Hee hee, Fengjiu laughed slyly. I was thinking that we're going to enter the mystic territory tomorrow, so I caught another one. So I went to catch another one. Look, I've just finished roasting it. It's still hot. Not bad, not bad. This is to my liking. He nodded approvingly and stroked his mustache. Then, he said, take a seat first. I'll come and drink after I'm done. Okay. She answered and opened the wrapped roasted meat. Then, she sat at the table and waited for him. Not long after, she saw a small bag placed in front of her. Chapter 14:12. For me. What's this? She looked at him in surprise. When she opened it, she saw that there were 7 or 8 bottles in the small bundle. Written on them were things like blood-staunching powder, poison-cleansing pill, spirit-condensing pill, and so on. Seeing these things, her heart slightly moved. This is all for me. If these things were to be sold outside, they would be worth a lot of money. He gave them to her so casually. And, these are for you. This secret realm isn't just a medicinal realm. Because there are top-grade spiritual herbs and some extremely rare spiritual herbs inside, there will be some spiritual beasts guarding it to prevent any injuries. When you go back, put these things into your chinkuan bag and carry them with you, just in case you need them. But, these things are too precious. Hearing this, he laughed. What precious or not? I'm an alchemist, I can refine any pill I want. These things are nothing. Take them, don't be so polite with me. Seeing this, her expression turned solemn. She stood up and cupped her hands in greeting. Thank you, senior martial brother. Although it was easy for him to get these things, it wasn't easy for him to give them away. Fengjiu would remember this kindness. Alright, quickly sit down and eat. This meat won't taste good when it's cold. He waved his hand as he spoke. He took out some wine and said, you can't wake up late tomorrow morning. This secret realm won't wait for anyone. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. Yes, I know. Ever since I entered the sect, I've been waking up early every day. I've already gotten used to it. But senior martial brother, you sleep until noon every day. You can't forget about entering the secret realm tomorrow. I know. Come, this jade tablet is for you. With this jade tablet, you can enter without me opening the barrier. If I really oversleep tomorrow, you must come and call me. He handed a jade tablet to Fengjiu as he spoke and tore off a piece of meat to eat. Fengjiu took the jade tablet and glanced at it, then put it away. Yes, I know. Don't worry. The two ate and chatted in the cave. When the moon was high in the sky, Fengjiu walked back with swaying steps. As he walked, he hummed a little tune. He was in a very good mood. However, when she arrived at the path leading to the bottom of the 7th summit, her footsteps paused and she could not help but glance at the 8th summit. What was her mother doing at this time? As he thought about it, he looked to his left and right. When he saw that there was no one around, he retracted his aura and charged towards the 8th summit. She was already extremely familiar with the barriers and runes of the 8th summit. She easily avoided them, and without alerting anyone, she arrived at her mother's cave abode and sat on a tree not too far away. The lush leaves covered the night sky. Dressed in green, she sat on a big tree. Her aura did not leak out at all, as if she had become one with the tree. She leaned against the tree and looked at the cave abode with narrowed eyes. After looking at it for a while, she still could not see anything. As a result, she yawned and closed her eyes, preparing to sleep there. However, not long after she closed her eyes, she suddenly heard some noise. She opened her eyes and saw that the barrier to the cave abode had opened. A woman dressed in white walked out. It was her mother. It was already so late. Where was she going? She was slightly startled. When she saw her mother slowly walking forward, she could not help but pause and follow behind her. Chapter 14:13. She followed her in secret. After walking for a while, she realized that her mother was heading towards the 9th summit. Why was she going to the 9th summit so late at night? She was puzzled as she watched the white figure in front of her walk up the 9th summit with light steps. She could not help but frown. She had been to the 9th summit once before. There was no barrier on it, but there were 2 nascent soul cultivators guarding it. Moreover, there were many killing formations inside. If she entered by mistake, she would definitely die. However, while there were nascent soul cultivators guarding the front, there were none at the back. She had gone up from the back of the mountain last time, so she did not alert the people of the 9th summit. She watched her mother enter the 9th summit from afar. She saw the 2 nascent soul cultivators sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed. She thought for a moment and quietly retreated. She planned to go up the 9th summit from the back of the 8th summit to see what was going on. There were restrictions on flying between the mountain walls at the back of the mountain. It was only limited to the top and bottom of the mountain. If she wanted to fly down from the 9th summit, she only needed to go around this restriction. She could fly in other areas, but she could not reach the summit. If she wanted to go up from the mountain walls at the back of the mountain, the only way was to climb. His body clung to the mountain wall as he climbed up. He accidentally stepped on a soft rock and slipped down a little. His whole body fell down a little. She held on to the rock and glanced down at the falling rock. She then climbed up again. She thought to herself that she should get a rope or something here to make it easier for her to go through the back door. Not long after, she arrived at the top. She avoided the formation and hid her presence as she went into the bamboo forest. The place where the 3 Yangtze lived was not a cave, but a bamboo courtyard. The bamboo courtyard was in the middle of a bamboo forest. It was extremely quiet and serene. The bamboo was spiritual bamboo, and there was a formation in the bamboo forest to prevent outsiders from entering without being summoned. However, formations were nothing to her. She passed through the formation in the bamboo forest in a few steps and arrived near the bamboo courtyard. Last time, she had sneaked in once, but she didn't see the 3 Yangtze. At this time, in the darkness of the night, the bamboo courtyard was as bright as day. She could still see her mother's figure reflected on the wall under the illumination of the light. When she saw this, she held her breath and quietly approached. She wanted to see what they were doing inside. What was it that required them to give orders in the middle of the night? You were brought back by me from a lower country, and I even took you in as my last disciple. You have to work harder than others, so that I won't waste my efforts in nurturing you. In the bamboo house, the middle-aged man sitting upright spoke in a deep voice. His sharp gaze stared at Shangguan Wanrong, who was standing respectfully in front of him. He said, "Remember Master's words. When you enter the secret realm this time, you must pick those 3 top-grade spiritual medicines." Yes. Shangguan Wanrong complied and listened to him explain a few more things. Finally, she saw him take out a bottle of medicine. There is an elixir in this bottle that can help you enter the middle stage of the Aurous Core realm as soon as possible. After entering the secret territory, I have other tasks for your senior brothers. You just need to do what I tell you. Yes, disciple understands. Thank you, Master. She took the bottle and stored the pills away before saying, "If Master has no other instructions, this disciple will take her leave first. Go." The 3 Yangtze waved his hand, indicating for her to leave. Outside, Fengjiu, who had seen this scene from the shadows and heard the conversation between the 2 people inside, leaned to the side and hid in the shadows. He watched his mother walk out of the bamboo house and walk down the mountain peak. Chapter 14:14. Seeing that her mother had left, she paused for a moment, then left from the back of the mountain. The next morning, she packed her things and headed to Qin Dao's cave residence. She didn't really believe that he would wake up early. After all, she had been here for quite some time and she had never seen him wake up early. Kiki, Kiki. Green hair appeared out of nowhere and followed beside her, clucking. Seeing this, Fengjiu glanced at it and said, "Go away, I don't have time to hang around with you today." Ha, ha. Green hair followed Feng Nine nonchalantly. He walked with his two short legs and swayed his round body as he followed Feng Nine to Qin Dao's cave residence. Sure enough, when everyone had reported to the transportation formation, she entered Qin Dao's cave residence and found that he was still sleeping soundly. Looking at the figure sleeping soundly on the bed, she secretly shook her head. Just as she was about to wake him up, she saw Green Hair, who had followed her in, jump to the head of the bed, raise its neck and cry out at the top of its voice. Kiki Kiki. Kiki Kiki. Hearing the crowing of the rooster and seeing Green Hair raising its head and crowing loudly, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. Fine, just let it be. Green Hair was the best at waking people up. Kiki Kiki. Where did the rooster come from so early in the morning? Qin Dao muttered, turned around and waved his hand. Green Hair jumped up and landed firmly on Qin Dao's body. Kiki Kiki. Ah! So noisy. He angrily jumped up and sat up. When he opened his eyes with anger and saw Fengjiu standing by the bed and staring at him, he couldn't help but be stunned. Fengjiu. Ah! We're going to the mystic realm today. Heavens! I woke up late, I woke up late. Wait for me, I'll be done soon. As he spoke, he hurriedly rushed to the bathroom to wash up, then put on his clothes and tied his black hair into a hairpin before going to Fengjiu. How is it? Is this okay? Your head is crooked. Fengjiu pointed at the crown on his head. Hearing this, Qin Dao widened his eyes and blew his mustache. What do you mean my head is crooked? Don't you know how to speak properly? She adjusted the crown on her head as she walked outside. Hurry up, don't lose track of the group. He called out to Fengjiu to walk faster. As the two of them walked towards the teleportation portal, they met Luoheng, who was in a hurry and looked as disheveled as Qin Dao. Senior brother Luo, you also woke up late. Fengjiu raised his voice to greet him. Oh, it's you. It's so early in the morning. He paused, glanced at Qin Dao, and asked, Fengjiu, don't tell me you're thinking of following senior brother Qin into the mystic realm. Hearing this, Fengjiu grinned, Senior brother Luo, you're really smart. Upon hearing this, Luoheng was stunned. Are you serious? You're only in the foundation establishment realm. With your cultivation level, aren't you afraid that you'll end up as fertilizer for the spirit herbs inside? The corner of Fengjiu's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. Qin Dao glanced at Luoheng and said, just take care of yourself, what are you talking about? Fengjiu, hurry up, ignore him. As he spoke, he quickened his pace. Hey, wait for me, we'll have company. Luoheng shouted and hurriedly caught up with them. Chapter 14-15. Cluck cluck cluck. Suddenly, the sound of a rooster crowing could be heard. Everyone was startled and looked towards the source of the sound. Fengjiu was also startled. She lowered her head and saw that Green Hair, who was clearly left behind, had somehow caught up with her. It was standing beside her with its head held high and chest puffed out as it looked at the crowd. It even crowed a few times from time to time. Isn't this a 7th level spiritual bird? It's a 7th level spiritual bird indeed. However, shouldn't it avoid people as far away as possible? Why is it coming to the crowd? This 7th level spiritual bird looks so fat. I recognize this Green Hair. It has been wandering around 3 Yang Peak recently. I think it's a servant disciple's pet. One of them said as his gaze swept across the crowd and landed on Fengjiu. He raised his chin and said, "Ah, it's him. However, why is this servant disciple here too?" Hearing this, everyone's gaze landed on Fengjiu, who was dressed in green. When he met everyone's gaze, Fengjiu smiled embarrassedly. He had a simple and honest expression on his face and pretended not to hear that person's words. He looked around and sized up the crowd. "What are you looking at? I brought him here. What's wrong? Do you have a problem with that?" Chen Dao glared and swept his gaze across the surrounding disciples. Seeing that it was him, the crowd no longer paid attention to him. They knew about Chen Dao. One of the sect's elders was his backer. If they could avoid offending him, they naturally wouldn't. With Chen Dao's status, it wasn't impossible for him to bring along a servant disciple. "Green hair, hurry up and go back." Fengjiu gestured and waved his hand at Green Hair, telling it to hurry back to the cave dwelling. Unexpectedly, Green Hair turned its neck and glanced at Fengjiu. It clucked and squatted at her feet. Its round body squatted there like a ball. It was so conspicuous that it was hard for people to ignore it. "It's okay. I'll bring it along. If I'm hungry, I can roast it." Chen Dao stared at the green-furred cat that was squatting by Fengjiu's feet as he rubbed his stomach. He woke up in a hurry and didn't have time to eat. Fengjiu's mouth twitched, speechless. Initially, she wanted to roast or stew Green Hair. Who would have thought that she would find out that it still had an egg? Only then did she give up on the thought of killing it. Who knew that even though she didn't plan to eat it, it kept circling around her? She didn't know when it started, but everyone knew that Green Hair was her pet. In fact, she had been letting it go. She didn't even have enough to eat, so naturally, she didn't have anything to feed it. She only occasionally threw some pills to it. As it ate, Green Hair grew fatter. What was strange was that the egg hadn't been born yet. "Disciples of 3 Yang Peak, gather here." Suddenly, a deep voice was heard. Chen Dao, who was at the side, said, "Come over quickly. Martial Uncle Duan is gathering the disciples of 3 Yang Peak." Fengjiu nodded. It was also at this time that the people from the other peaks shouted, asking the disciples of the other peaks to quickly gather. She saw that her mother was standing at the front in white clothes with an indifferent expression. There were a few middle-aged men beside her. From the looks of it, they should be the other disciples of 3 Yang Master. Thinking about what 3 Yang Master told her mother last night, she was a little puzzled. What kind of top-grade spiritual medicine was it? If it was really important, why didn't 3 Yang Master enter the secret realm to pick it himself? Chapter 14-16. As the voice fell, the hundreds of disciples in the surroundings quickly looked for members to form a team with. 10 people formed a team, and every member was extremely important. If they were strong enough, they wouldn't have to worry about encountering any danger in the secret realm. Fengjiu followed beside Chen Dao, his gaze fixed on the white figure in front of the crowd. He wondered if she was going to look for those supreme-grade spirit herbs. Would she act alone in the secret realm? Let's form a team of 31. Let's find a few more people to form a team. Luo Heng came to their side and said while looking around. When he saw someone familiar, he laughed loudly. "Senior brother Lu, you haven't formed a team yet, right? Why don't you join us?" The man surnamed Lu was at the peak of the Golden Elixir realm. When he heard Luo Heng's words, he glanced at Chen Dao and Fengjiu and said, "No, I've already formed a team with others." With that, he turned and walked away. Seeing this, Luo Heng was stunned for a moment. When he saw another familiar person, he shouted again, "Senior brother Jiang, come and join our team." "No, senior brother Lin has already invited me to join his team." That person also said, ignoring Luo Heng and the other two. Luo Heng did not give up and shouted a few more times. He even went forward to pull people over. However, after glancing at Fengjiu, those people all shook their heads and refused to be in the same team as the three of them. Strange, what's wrong with these people? I'm at least at the Golden Elixir realm. Why are they ignoring me like this? Luo Heng said somewhat angrily as he walked towards Fengjiu and Qindao. Fengjiu smiled embarrassedly and said embarrassedly, "Senior brother Luo, it's all my fault. They don't want to form a team with us because they feel that my combat power is too weak. I'm really sorry that I've implicated you." Seeing that Fengjiu was apologetic, Luo Heng couldn't say anything to reprimand him. Seeing that everyone had ignored them, he couldn't help but feel anxious. If they didn't manage to form a team with 10 people, they would have to wait for the remaining people who hadn't been invited to form a team. What's wrong with that? No one wants to form a team with us. That's great. We'll form a team of 3. That way, we won't have to worry about trouble if we don't agree with each other. Chen Dao said disapprovingly. He stroked his mustache and scanned the surroundings. Then, he said to Fengjiu, "Fengjiu, you know Uncle Master Shengwan? Look, she's looking at you." Hearing this, Fengjiu looked to the front. Sure enough, her mother seemed to have noticed her in the crowd and was looking at her. Seeing this, she grinned and waved at her. Shangguan Wanrong's gaze flickered slightly as she looked at the thin and small cyan figure in the crowd. With a casual glance, she saw that it was the errand boy named Fengjiu. Just as she was looking at the boy with furrowed brows, wondering why he was here, she saw the boy grin. That joyful smile, pure and natural, bloomed on the boy's delicate face, causing her heart to skip a beat. That day, they had said that he was only at the foundation establishment stage and could not enter the secret territory. She did not expect to see him here today. However, with only the foundation establishment stage, his strength could be said to be at the bottom of the hundreds of people. Wasn't he afraid? Wasn't he afraid of encountering danger inside? Chapter 14-17. After about the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, the people from each peak quickly formed into small teams. The remaining people who were unwilling to be in the same team could only make do with it. Fengjiu, Chen Dao, and the others were in the same team as 5 men and 2 women. The 5 men looked to be in their 20s, while the others looked to be in their 30s or 40s. However, their true ages were much older than what they showed. As for the 2 women, they were extremely pleasing to the eye. Their figures were voluptuous, and their faces were bewitching. However, for some reason, they seemed to be very interested in Qindao. They squeezed past Fengjiu, who was beside Qindao, and the 2 of them kept talking to Qindao. Seeing this, the other men revealed cold gazes and were extremely displeased. After the people from each peak saw that everyone had formed their teams, they gave each other a lecture before bringing everyone into the secret realm through the transportation formation. With a flash of light, several hundred people disappeared into the transportation formation in batches. When they reappeared, they were already in a forest filled with dense spirit energy. Fengjiu only felt that she was pushed out by a force. She staggered and quickly stabilized herself, so she didn't fall to the ground. In front of her, many people couldn't withstand the force and fell to the ground. They couldn't stand the force and sat on the grass and trees, letting out low cries. After stabilizing himself, Chen Dao looked back and saw Fengjiu looking around. He did not seem to feel any discomfort from the transportation formation. He could not help but stroke his mustache and reveal a meaningful smile. "Senior brother Chen, help me up." "Senior brother Chen, why did you push me away just now? You made me fall," the 2 women said at the same time. As soon as they spoke, the 2 of them looked at each other. In each other's eyes, they could see the provocation in each other's eyes. "Junior sisters, let us help you up. Come, come." A man in his 30s, who was in the same team as Fengjiu, quickly stepped forward. He reached out to help the 2 beautiful women who had fallen to the ground, but when he met the 2 women's cold gazes, he awkwardly withdrew his hand. "No need. It's good that you don't need it. If you don't need it, it means that you're fine. Hurry up and get up. As the man spoke, he withdrew his hand and viciously glanced at Qingdao. Qingdao had one hand behind his back and the other hand stroking his mustache. He ignored the man's anger and looked at the two women who had fallen to the ground. He chuckled, "Junior sisters, although I, Qingdao, am unparalleled and handsome, the two of you will really cause me a lot of trouble." Senior brother Chen. Their beautiful eyes moved slightly, and their voices carried a hint of coquettishness as they looked at him. "However, if you two junior sisters really like me, I'll go ask your master for your hand in marriage. I believe that with my status and position, it is more than enough for me to marry two junior sisters." Hearing this, the two women on the ground froze. They knew that they had gone too far. Thus, they quickly stood up and bowed to him. "Senior brother Chen Xian, please don't blame us. We actually..." They had only wanted to play around and see who could win Qingdao over first. Who knew that Qingdao saw through them at a glance? Luo Heng pursed his lips and muttered in his heart, "He can't even handle one, and he wants to marry two. This is not an ordinary pervert." Chapter 14-18. "Oh, I'm just looking around. I feel that the spiritual qi here is really rich, and I can see herbs everywhere." She turned around and said. Actually, she wanted to see where her mother was. However, she couldn't find her after looking around. On the contrary, this place was really strange. After entering this place, there were herbs everywhere on the ground, but they were all common herbs. "You don't know about this, right?" Qingdao walked over and said, "This is the sect's secret realm. Every spring, the sect will send people to spread some spiritual herb seeds here. This way, the spiritual herbs in the sect's secret realm will be inexhaustible." "That's right. Although there are weeds in this forest, those who know about spiritual herbs will realize that there are some herbs among the weeds. Moreover, even weeds have their own medicinal properties. It's just a matter of whether or not people understand their medicinal properties." Luo Heng nodded and explained. The people at the side were puzzled when they saw the two of them taking care of a servant disciple. They thought to themselves, "Is there something special about this servant disciple?" However, after looking at Fengjiu from head to toe, they saw that he was wearing the most ordinary green clothes. There was nothing special about him. If there was anything special about him, it would be his pair of clear and bright eyes. "Alright, the other teams have left. Let's go too," Qingdao said. He patted his robe and prepared to walk forward. However, at this moment, a man from their team blocked Qingdao's path. "Wait a minute." Qingdao looked at the man in his 40s. This person should be the oldest among them. He wasn't a disciple of the three young peak and had never interacted with him before. "What's the matter?" Qingdao asked, indicating that he should speak. "Our team should have a leader. Although I'm not talented, I feel that I'm much better than all of you. Let me be the leader." Pfft. Before Qingdao could say anything, Luo Heng sneered. "What are you laughing at?" The man with the surname Jia looked at Luo Heng unhappily. "Of course I'm laughing at you. What else can I laugh at?" Luo Heng crossed his arms and walked forward. He lifted his chin and looked at him with disdain. "Since you know that you're not talented, you still want to be the leader. You're really thick-skinned." When the man surnamed Jia heard this, he glared angrily and said, "Senior brother, don't be so disrespectful." Luo Heng spread his hands and shrugged. "I'm just telling the truth." Hearing this, the other people at the side couldn't help but laugh. They all felt that this person was overestimating himself and looking for humiliation. How could someone like him want to be the leader of their team? Even if that was the case, they would have to ask for their permission first. "Yes. I also feel that senior martial brother Jia is not qualified to be our team leader." The one who spoke was one of the two women. Her voice was drawn out as if she was deliberately whetting the man's appetite. When the last few words came out of her mouth, the man's face turned ugly. She covered her mouth and chuckled, looking very pleased. If anyone is going to be the captain, it should be me. Another man stepped forward. He looked to be in his 30s. His body was more robust, and his voice was full of energy. "TSK, you. I'm not convinced." Another person also said, and snorted, obviously not satisfied with that person being the leader. Chapter 14:19. How can that be? There are so many men here. If we let a woman be the leader, wouldn't it be a joke? Chen Dao waved his hand and said, "You two stand aside. You have no chance of being the leader." Hearing this, the woman gritted her teeth but didn't say anything else. Then, she heard Chen Dao say, "You don't have to fight. The position of leader belongs to me. Why should it be you?" "That's right, why should it be you?" "I don't agree." "I don't agree either." Hearing them speak one by one, Chen Dao stroked his mustache and narrowed his eyes. He looked at them and said, "You don't agree? Fine, if you don't agree, you can fight with me. If you win, you can be the leader and I will listen to you." However, when he said this, the few people hesitated. Forget it, forget it. It's decided. Let's go. You've been arguing for half a day over such a trivial matter. Luo Heng said as he ignored them and walked forward. Seeing this, the others didn't say anything and walked forward. 10 people in a team, with the intention of looking out for each other. However, the 10 of them were gathered at the other peaks. It would be strange if they couldn't work together. Fengjiu quietly followed behind them. Occasionally, when she saw some spiritual herbs, she would squat down to pick them. Although they were just ordinary spiritual herbs, as long as they were mature enough to be used as medicine, she would pick them and put them in her qiankuan bag. The spiritual herbs inside belonged to whoever harvested them. Although it was a registration, every disciple who entered had to pay a considerable amount of contribution points and fees. As for what kind of spiritual herbs they could pick and whether it was a worthwhile trip, it depended on their own abilities. Luo Heng took a sip of water and glanced back at the green figure who was squatting down to pick. He shouted, "Fengjiu, these spiritual herbs are useless. There are plenty of them in the sect. Don't waste your energy. Since I have nothing to do, I'll pick some as I go. They're all mature spiritual herbs, so it'd be a waste if I don't pick them." Fengjiu said as he put a spiritual herb into his qiankuan bag. Hearing this, Chen Dao smiled and slowed down to walk side by side with Fengjiu. He said, "You're not even an alchemy apprentice, so you can't refine medicinal pills even if you pick these. But it doesn't matter." At this point, he lowered his voice and added, "When the time comes, catch a few more bamboo spirit rats and roast them for me to eat. I'll help you refine the pills. Let's talk about it after I gather all the herbs." Fengjiu said with a smile, "I still have to thank Senior Brother Chen for his kindness." "You do have to thank me." He nodded and took out 2 fruits, handing one to Fengjiu. "Eat. To fill my stomach." When the 2 women in front saw this, they frowned and glanced at Fengjiu, then came to Chen Dao's side. "Senior Brother Chen, we're also women. Why do you only care about this little odd job worker and ignore us?" Crunch. Chen Dao took a bite of the fruit, and a crisp crunch was heard. He glanced at the 2 women and said, "How can this be the same? You 2 are alchemists at any rate, and your cultivations are at the golden core stage. Moreover, you're not from our 3 young peak. Even if I'm a busybody, I won't care about you." Chapter 14:20. Hearing this, Fengjiu's mouth twitched. What kind of words were they saying? Even if she was the youngest among them, she wasn't young enough to look like his son, right? When the 2 girls heard this, their expressions changed. They had only said a few words and were already shut down. They felt as if they were suffocating in their hearts, making them very uncomfortable. They looked at the ruffian Qingdao with an ugly expression, then glared angrily at Fengjiu who was playing with the fruit. They didn't say anything, only snorted and quickly walked forward. They really had too much free time to think of talking to him. This person was really too hateful. Crunch. Fengjiu took a bite of the fruit, the crisp and sweet taste spreading on the tip of her tongue. She looked ahead and said to Qingdao, "Senior brother Chen, although I'm a little young, I'm not young enough to be your son, right? What do you mean by letting them give birth to a child to compensate you? If you're really interested in them, then don't be shy and chase after them. With senior brother Chen's charm, don't mention one, even two would be more than enough." Ha ha ha. You little brat, you also think that my charm is boundless and unstoppable, right? AI, it's good that you know, don't say it out loud. You have to know that I've always been low-key and never liked to show off to others. Although he said this, his voice became louder and louder. Even the people in front couldn't help but turn around to look. Fengjiu was speechless and didn't say anything else. She just ate the fruit and walked. Perhaps this area was still considered the outer area. There were some ordinary spirit herbs, but there were fewer precious ones. Occasionally, one or two stalks would be picked by the people in front. Actually, she wanted to move alone. This way, other than gathering spirit herbs with them, she could also find out where her mother went. However, in this situation, it seemed impossible to move alone. The group walked in and along the way, they met some people from other groups. Compared to the cultivators from other places, Fengjiu noticed that even if these alchemists fancied the other party's pills, they wouldn't forcefully snatch them. Instead, they would propose an exchange. As a result, the entire journey was peaceful, and there were no violent incidents. When they gradually entered the inner area and planned to rest for a while before going in, they saw another team of people also come here and rest not far from them. "Qingdao, so it really is you. I saw your funny mustache from afar, and I knew it was you." A man in his 30s called out, greeting Qingdao. However, rather than calling it a greeting, it was more of a provocation. Qingdao glanced at the man and stood up in surprise. "Huh? Wasn't this the little bastard? What a coincidence, I can't believe I can meet you here." Fengjiu was speechless when he heard their conversation. He quietly moved to the side and tried his best to avoid them. When the man heard that, his face darkened. He stood up with an ugly expression and shouted, "Qingdao, don't give me a fancy name. If you can't read, go back and get a teacher to teach you. Listen carefully, my name is Wang Ba." Chapter 1421. Qingdao. You son of a bitch. He cursed as he stared at Qingdao with eyes that were about to spit fire. When he thought about how he had lost to Qingdao in the past and how he had suffered at Qingdao's hands, the anger in his heart surged. You don't have to shout so loudly. I know you're a son of a bitch. Qingdao picked his ear and leaned against a tree leisurely. He looked at Wang Ba who was being held down by a few people and said, "You better leave while your master Chen is in a good mood today. Otherwise, I won't be responsible if anything happens in the middle of the night or at any time." Hearing this, Fengjiu looked at him in surprise because she noticed that after Qingdao said this, not only did the expressions of the 10 people change slightly and retreat, even the expressions of the other team members changed. She couldn't help but feel strange. What could have happened to make these people so afraid of him? She had been at Three Yang Peak for some time, but she didn't seem to have heard anything about Qingdao. "Qingdao, let's wait and see. One day, you will die in my hands." Wang Ba said hatefully, but he didn't go forward. Instead, he let his teammates pull him to the other side, as if he was really afraid of Qingdao's words. "Pfft! Coward!" Qingdao sneered. He didn't think much of Qingdao, so naturally, he wouldn't take his words to heart. He watched as Chen Dao's group left and turned around. Seeing that everyone was staring at him warily, he asked, "What's wrong? Why are you all looking at me like that? Do you think I'm going to eat you?" When everyone heard this, they silently looked away and didn't stare at him anymore. Fengjiu was curious when she saw this. Seeing him walk over, she asked, "Senior brother Chen, those people just now seem to be very afraid of you." Ha 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 ha. Chen Dao looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. His laughter contained a powerful aura that spread out and echoed in the forest. He put one hand on his waist and the other hand on his mustache. He laughed loudly and said, "Of course. Don't you know who I, Chen Dao, am? Can they not avoid me and give in to me when they see me?" At this moment, Luo Heng leaned forward and whispered to Fengjiu, who looked confused, "He has a dark history, so the medicine he makes is not spiritual medicine, but poison. Many people in the sect have suffered because of him, so they all avoid him." Hearing this, Fengjiu suddenly understood. So that's how it was. The proud Chen Dao glanced at the whispering crowd and shouted, "Hurry up and rest. Once night falls, we will enter the inner region. During this time, we can move around a bit. But remember, don't go too far. Otherwise, you will be separated from everyone." Hearing this, no one said anything because they were all alchemists. They knew that in this secret realm, there were some spiritual herbs that could only be picked at night. Fengjiu was resting under the tree with his eyes closed like everyone else. He was thinking about how she could leave without attracting their attention. When evening passed and night fell, under Chen Dao's lead, they got up and continued moving forward. In the forest at night, the sound of insects could be heard. Perhaps it was because they were not too far in, so they didn't hear the roars of spirit beasts. Chapter 1422. Chen Dao slowed down his footsteps and said to the person beside him, "You have to be careful when picking herbs here, some herbs cannot be touched." I'll remember that." Fengjiu nodded and replied. Then, they heard a pill master in front of them exclaim, "Look, it's the ghost grass. Quick, grab it." Fengjiu was stunned. Ghost grass. She looked in front of her and saw that in the darkness of the night, where the light of the fire shone, there was a stalk of white veil-like herb among the weeds, swaying in the night wind. It's really the ghost grass," she exclaimed in surprise. She didn't think that there would be ghost grass here. The ghost grass was a 4th-level spiritual herb and could be used in many types of pill recipes. However, no matter if it was in the market or anywhere else, the ghost grass was extremely rare and precious. This was because the ghost grass could run away. Even if it appeared there, you might not be able to pick it. "Ah! There's another one there," another person exclaimed. Then, Chen Dao said, "What's there to be surprised about? The ghost grass is a male and female spiritual herb. If one of them appears, the other one will be nearby. Quick, surround them and don't let them run away." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw the few pill masters in front of him pouncing towards the 2 stalks of ghost grass. With so many people pouncing on them, the 2 stalks of ghost grass were frightened and fled into the darkness of the night. Although Fengjiu had seen it before, this was the first time she saw spiritual herbs running away in front of her. She couldn't help but find it interesting. Especially when she saw that the few people in front of her didn't manage to catch the ghost grass and instead got themselves covered in mud, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She tried her best not to laugh out loud. "Ah! It's running away. Quick, chase it," one of the pill masters said and ran towards the front. The few people behind him hurriedly followed. "I found it first. It's mine. It belongs to whoever picks it." Seeing the few people in front scrambling to escape, Chen Dao shouted from behind, "Don't run too far. If you can't catch it, then forget it. There will definitely be more once we get inside." However, they were all busy catching the 2 ghost grass, so how could they pay attention to his words? Feng Jiu, Chen Dao, and Luo Heng stared blankly at the people who had disappeared in the blink of an eye. They felt a gust of wind blow and their bodies involuntarily shrank. If the team gets separated, what will happen? Feng Jiu hesitated for a moment, but still asked. Based on the current situation, if those people kept chasing after the ghost grass, wouldn't they get separated? In here, if you get separated, you will be left alone. Alchemists who are left alone do not have the ability to protect themselves. Moreover, if they encounter other people who are picking spirit herbs, they will definitely not be able to protect their spirit herbs. Hearing this, she looked at Chen Dao, who was explaining, and saw him shake his head helplessly. Actually, if I could move on my own, I think it would be better not to go with them. Even if they were in danger, they might not help me. And look, Sai, they only cause me trouble. Hee, senior brother Chen will probably look for them, right? Luo Heng, who was standing at the side, grinned and looked at Chen Dao, saying, Senior brother Chen, although you are sometimes a little careless, your sense of responsibility is still quite strong. Since you are the team leader, I believe that you will find your team members and prevent them from meeting other teams and getting their spirit herbs taken away or being beaten up. Pfft. Alright, you little brat, stop flattering me. Chapter 14:23. Hence, the three of them quickly chased after it. Faintly, they could hear the low cries of others in the night. Quick! Over there! Catch it! Ah! Can't you see where you're going? It's crashing into me. It's over there, don't let it escape. Come back if you can't get it. It's too dangerous to chase after the ghost grass. Chen Dao heard the words coming from the front and shouted loudly. However, since they finally saw the ghost grass, they definitely wouldn't let it go so easily. Hence, even though Chen Dao was shouting, the pill masters in front didn't think of stopping. Suddenly, there was a loud bang in front of them, followed by continuous cries of alarm. Ah! What's that? Ah! Something's pulling my leg. Ah! Not good, run. Chaotic sounds came. Chen Dao and the other two looked at each other and quickly ran forward. Faintly, they heard rustling and panicked voices. Then, they saw 2 or 3 pill masters running back. Senior brother Chen, it's not good, something happened. A man rushed forward and said anxiously. Under the light of the torch, one could see that his face was pale and flustered. The few of them have been caught by a ghost. Hearing this, Feng Jiu was stunned for a moment. Then, a strange look flashed across his face. Ghost? What kind of nonsense is this? The ghost grass was an elixir that would steal and run everywhere. It had spirituality. Hence, there was a rumor that the ghost grass liked eerie ghost lands. However, this was just a rumor. It was just a rumor released by some auctions outside in order to raise the price of nether grass. He didn't expect that this dignified sect alchemist would actually believe it. It was really funny. Chen Dao frowned. What nonsense are you talking about? We're serious. Something suddenly reached out from the grass and grabbed our legs. We ran away quickly, but the few of them were dragged away by their legs. That cold feeling was like a ghost's hand. It's too scary. The other person also said, and couldn't help but shudder. Feng Jiu's mouth twitched. Ghost's hand. He even touched it before. He even knew that Icy Cold's ghost hand was similar. She didn't know that these alchemists were so cowardly. In any case, they were all golden core cultivators. Could it be that they had become stupid from refining pills? You don't even know how to use your own cultivation. Alright, let's not talk about it for now. Let's go and take a look. Chen Dao said as he rushed forward. Feng Jiu, who was following behind, caught a glimpse of the pale faces of the few alchemists who had run back and were still retreating. Seeing this, she pursed her lips and ignored them as she followed Chen Dao and Luo Heng in that direction. However, when they arrived at that place, they saw that the surroundings were completely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. "There's nothing." As Luo Heng spoke, he looked around in surprise. Other than the few of them, there was no one else. Feng Jiu squatted down to check for a while, then said, "The weeds here have traces of being crushed, and the direction is in this direction. It should have been dragged there by something." She reached out and pointed to one side, then walked slowly in that direction while paying attention to the movements under her feet. Not long after, when she saw 2 stalks of ghost grass that came out of nowhere, she raised her eyebrows. "It's ghost grass." Chapter 14:24. This time, even though the few alchemists behind him wanted the phantom grass very much, they did not dare to act rashly. In any case, they had the speed of a gold core cultivator, but even with such speed, they still couldn't catch the ghost grass, and even lost a few people. At the moment, they didn't know whether those people were alive or dead. Their hearts were in a mess, and they had long lost their initial excitement. "You're not picking it. They're right there." Feng Jiu turned around and smiled at the few alchemists. "We can't pick it." The few of them sighed. They finally knew why the phantom grass was so rare in the sect, but the phantom grass in the auction house outside was so expensive. They had almost been toyed to death with just 2 stalks of grass. "I'm also more self-aware. If I know that I can't pick it, I'm too lazy to waste my energy." Luo Heng said as he looked in the direction Feng Jiu pointed and asked, "Feng Jiu, I didn't know that you knew how to track people." "But that's right, didn't you and I work together to catch that psychopathic murderer last time?" Speaking of this, he looked back at the others with a little pride and said, "Don't worry, I'm here. I'll protect you all. I'll also find a way to save those senior and junior brothers." "Ah!" Before he finished speaking, he cried out in alarm and lost his balance. With a bang, he fell to the ground and was quickly dragged into the forest by something. He was so shocked that his face changed and he cried for help. "Ah! Save me, a ghost is grabbing my feet." The few alchemists behind him saw this and retreated in horror. They watched as the torch in Luo Heng's hand was extinguished because of his fall. They watched as he was dragged into the forest by something in the night. Other than his cry of alarm, there was also the rustling sound of his body rubbing against the ground. "No. I'm not going, it's not safe inside," one of the alchemists said as he retreated until he came to a tree. He leaned against the tree and said to them, "I'll wait for you here." The others saw this and hesitated. Just as they were thinking about whether to continue following, they heard Chen Dao's voice in front of them. "Then you can just wait there. If you get dragged away or eaten by some beast, don't come looking for us. In addition, we will only continue to move forward. We don't have the time to turn back." Seeing that Chen Dao didn't even turn his head as he said these words, the few hesitant alchemists could only grit their teeth and follow. Although they were alchemists and had the strength of the gold core stage, their gold core stage cultivation was mainly based on the cultivation of spiritual power and aura. Their combat strength could be said to be the worst. It was also because of their lack of combat strength that they did not have the confidence to walk in here and could not be calm and collected. Luo Heng's voice disappeared after a while, as if he had fainted. Feng Jiu and Chen Dao couldn't help but look at each other. As they walked forward, Chen Dao pulled Feng Jiu back. "Follow behind me." As he spoke, he walked past Feng Jiu and continued forward. He didn't think much of it. He just thought that Feng Jiu was just a young man and only had the cultivation of the foundation establishment stage. With such strength, it was not suitable for him to walk in front. Moreover, he was considered an elder and couldn't let a junior take the risk. Chapter 14:25. What was that thing that had reached out and dragged them away? Although it was silent, it couldn't have been a ghost. The bell at her waist didn't ring, so one could imagine that this place was very clean. The two of them walked in front, while the others behind them gritted their teeth and followed. When they heard a faint rustling sound, Fengjiu focused her eyes and used the light of the fire to see an ink-black vine as thick as an arm shuttling through the grass towards them. She stopped and raised her hand, indicating for the others to stop and not move, then pulled Qingdao back. "What's wrong?" Qingdao stopped and turned to look at Fengjiu. "Senior brother Chen, look." Fengjiu gestured and pointed at the vine heading their way. Qingdao looked in the direction Fengjiu was pointing. His face stiffened and he drew his sword. "It's a burrowing dragon." As soon as he spoke, the thing that Fengjiu had mistaken for a vine suddenly stopped and its arm-thick body rose up. Strangely, a pair of strange eyes appeared on the ink-black head of the burrowing dragon. "Ah! It's not a vine!" Fengjiu exclaimed in shock. Only when she saw the thing's true appearance did she realize that it was a burrowing dragon. Whoosh! As she spoke, Qingdao swung the sword in his hand, and a sharp beam of sword qi shot out towards the burrowing dragon. The burrowing dragon dodged the sword qi, but it was still struck by the sharp energy sword qi. However, it wasn't injured at all. Not even a scratch could be seen on its skin, let alone cut it in half. Whoosh! Clang! Clang! Another sword qi shot out. This time, it hit the burrowing dragon head-on. The sound of metal clashing rang out and sparks shot out from the burrowing dragon's body. In the face of Qingdao's sharp sword qi, the burrowing dragon wasn't afraid at all. It didn't retreat and instead leaped towards them, as if it wanted to take another person away. "A little worm dares to be impudent in front of me? Watch how I cut you into pieces and make sure you don't even have a corpse left." Qingdao shouted and attacked again. For a moment, the sound of metal clanging could be heard, and the sharp sound of wind whistled through the air. Fengjiu saw that Qingdao couldn't take down the burrowing dragon and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. With Qingdao's nascent soul strength, he could easily deal with the burrowing dragon. However, even after slashing for a while, he still couldn't figure out that this burrowing dragon was a metal attribute spirit beast. When dealing with metal attribute spirit beasts, unless one had a truly famous saber or a good sword, one wouldn't be able to cut a burrowing dragon even after slashing for 8 to 10 times. "Senior brother Chen, this insect seems to be of the metal attribute. Why don't you try using fire?" she suggested as she walked to the side. She wanted to see if Luo Heng and the others had been caught by the burrowing dragon. Hearing this, Qingdao was stunned for a moment. After he reacted, he channeled his spirit power into the sword in his hand. Seeing the long sword in his hand burst into flames and roaring like a fire snake, he couldn't help but laugh. "If I can't cut down this little worm, I'll go back to the countryside and farm. Come. Eat your grandpa Chen's sword." Chapter 1426. Xiu. Who? Fengjiu, who was walking to the side, saw that the sword was raised high and slashed down fiercely. With a swish, the drilling dragon was cut in two. With a bang, the filth in the drilling dragon's body sprayed out and splashed on the ground, causing the entire air to emit a foul smell. When the several alchemists saw this, they all breathed a sigh of relief. "It's good that it's dead, it's good that it's dead." However, as soon as the smell of the burrowing dragon spread out, rustling sounds came from the night. In the blink of an eye, a dozen or so burrowing dragons as thick as arms jumped out in front of them. Some of them curled their tails and attacked at their feet. Ah! So many! The several alchemists quickly jumped up and hid in the trees while others took out medicines and sprinkled them in front of them to prevent the earth-drilling dragons from approaching. Even Qingdao was stunned when he saw this. However, knowing that this thing was afraid of fire, it wasn't difficult to deal with it. However, when he saw those pill masters actually climbing up the trees to hide like monkeys, he was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at them, cursing loudly. "Aren't you all ashamed? You're already so old, yet you're still climbing up the trees like monkeys to hide. Are you planning to leave these little insects to me to deal with? Is there anyone as unrighteous and courageous as you? Aren't you all ashamed?" When they heard this, their faces turned red and they felt ashamed, but they didn't go down and instead said, "Senior Brother Chen, you're the captain, so you naturally have to shoulder the responsibility of protecting us, right? Do you think you're the captain for nothing? Besides, our combat strength isn't good, but Senior Brother Chen is different. Those earth-drilling dragons are just small insects in your eyes, but in our eyes, they're big guys. You can kill them with a single slash of your sword, but if we go down, we might be swallowed at any time." Hearing this, Chen Dao felt both funny and angry. What were these people talking about? If they were timid, then they had a reason to be timid. What a disgrace to men. Just as he was thinking, he saw a earth-drilling dragon that wasn't so dark rushing towards him. He snorted and slashed down with the sword in his hand. When the earth-drilling dragon was cut in two, he mischievously picked it up with his sword and slapped it with the blade, directly slapping the two parts of the earth-drilling dragon towards the several people in the tree. The few of them were caught off guard when they felt an object flying towards them. With a bang, it landed on their chests. When they felt the cold touch on their chests, they looked down and couldn't help but scream out loud. "Ah!" After that, Chen Dao would throw the burrowing dragons at them after killing them. Worst of all, he would pick up a smaller burrowing dragon and throw it at the people in the tree. "Ah! Chen! No one's like you. You are too outrageous. Ugh!" Some people cried out in alarm, and some vomited. For a moment, the few people in the tree were in a mess. In the end, they couldn't take it anymore and could only come down from the tree. However, their bodies were covered in the juice of the earth-drilling dragons, and it was incomparably disgusting. "Senior Brother Chen, they're here." Fengjiu's voice came from the front. After Chen Dao dealt with the earth-drilling dragons, he leaped to Fengjiu's side and saw Luo Heng and the others lying unconscious in the mud pit. Although they weren't moving, from their breathing, they seemed to be fine. Chapter 1427. As soon as he finished speaking, he stepped forward to drag them out. Unexpectedly, as soon as he walked in, his expression changed. He immediately stopped Fengjiu, who was about to step into the mud pit. "Don't come in." Fengjiu was startled and stopped. Seeing him standing there with a slightly changed expression, she asked, "What's wrong?" As soon as she finished speaking, she saw that his figure seemed to sink a little in the mud pit. She was slightly surprised. "This is the flowing mud ground." "That's right. It's the flowing mud ground. You can't come in." He maintained his figure standing, and even his breathing became lighter as he spoke. Now she finally knew why everyone was covered in mud. Some of them only had their heads sticking out. It turned out that this unassuming mud pit was actually the flowing mud ground. The flowing mud ground, as its name suggested, was a muddy ground. If someone entered by mistake, they would be trapped. If they struggled, they would sink even faster. Just like now, he was standing, but due to gravity, he had sunk halfway to his waist. He couldn't see the bottom of the mud beneath his feet, and the mud on his body was sucking him in like a magnet. Flowing mud ground. "Quick, find some branches and use them to pull Chen Dao out." The few people who rushed over shouted and hurriedly found branches to pull him out. However, at this moment, Fengjiu's hand moved. A thick rope flew out and wrapped around Chen Dao's hand. In the next moment, he pulled hard and pulled him out. Pop! He was pulled out of the mud with a popping sound. He was pulled out of the mud like a radish. Phew, I was so scared that I didn't even dare to breathe. I was too careless. As Chen Dao spoke, he saw the rope in his hand loosen. His eyes flashed. He stroked his mustache and looked at Fengjiu with a grin. Kid, you're quite strong. You have some hidden strength. Fengjiu looked at him smoothing his mustache with his muddy hand. Instantly, two muddy mustaches formed. He couldn't help but laugh. Senior brother Chen, you're so handsome and slender that it wasn't hard for me to pull you out. Ha 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 ha, the words that come out of your mouth really make people happy. Good, good, good. Senior brother will definitely reward you later. He lowered his head and looked at his half-body that was covered in mud. He sighed, why do I feel like a pig in mud with my whole body covered in mud? Hearing this, Fengjiu narrowed her eyes and smiled. Looking at the unconscious people in the mud, she smiled and said, Senior brother Chen, if you don't pull them up, they'll sink down. Because the mud was stirred up, the people in the mud began to sink. Chen Dao turned around and looked. In the next moment, he leaped into the air and pulled them out of the mud. Fengjiu, who was at the back, saw this and leaped out to pull two people out. Not long after, the two of them rescued the few people inside, but they were all unconscious. Burrowing dragons have stingers on their tails. Those stingers have medicinal properties that can make people unconscious. It's different from ordinary knockout drugs. Our drugs probably won't be able to cure them. Fengjiu, go and pick the earth dragon gallbladders that were cut in two. After Chen Dao checked the few people, he let Fengjiu go and pick the earth dragon gallbladders. Okay. Fengjiu responded. She walked back and found a dark green egg-sized earth dragon gallbladders in the abdomen of the burrowing dragons that were cut in two. Chapter 1428. Fengjiu couldn't help but grin as he watched the dark green earth dragon's gallbladder being poured down his throat. This earth dragon's gallbladder was also a type of medicine. However, an unprocessed earth dragon's gallbladder was bitter and fishy. It tasted really bad. However, it was indeed miraculous. Not long after it was poured down, the first person who was forced to drink it had already coughed and woke up. Cough cough. Luo Heng woke up from choking. He smacked his lips and tasted the bitter and fishy taste in his mouth. When he saw what Chen Dao was doing from the corner of his eye, he immediately lay on the ground and vomited. Ugh! Hey, senior brother Luo, you're eating earth dragon's gallbladder. It's not poisonous. It just doesn't taste good. Fengjiu grinned at the side. He watched Luo Heng raise his head and glare at him before lying on the ground and vomiting again. The few alchemists at the side watched, especially when their gazes stopped on Fengjiu for a while. They felt a little ashamed and curious about this little errand boy. Along the way, this little odd job worker was even more adapted to everything here than they were. Compared to this little odd job worker, they were like young masters who had never experienced hardships and were out of tune with this forest. However, this errand boy was different. He was clearly only at the foundation establishment stage, but he was bold and careful. Moreover, when they retreated, he stepped forward. Thinking of this scene, they couldn't help but treat him differently. Why am I covered in mud? Luo Heng looked at Fengjiu and asked. I clearly remember being dragged away by something cold, and then I lost consciousness. It was the earth-drilling dragon that dragged you into the muddy ground. Fengjiu pointed at the muddy ground not far away and smiled. Senior brother Chen and I rescued you. Hearing this, they looked at each other, then stood up and cupped their hands to thank Chen Dao. Thank you, senior brother Chen. Thank you, junior brother Chen. However, they all ignored Fengjiu. In their eyes, he was just an odd job worker. There was no need for them to thank him. He was not worthy of their thanks. Fengjiu saw that they didn't even thank her and directly ignored her. She just smiled and didn't say anything. Thanks, Fengjiu. I'll treat you to a drink when we get back. Luo Heng stepped forward and reached out his hand to pat Fengjiu's shoulder. Unexpectedly, he patted empty air. Senior brother Luo, I'm still clean. Fengjiu took 3 steps back and looked at him with a smile. Luoheng froze for a moment, then laughed. Okay. I know my hands are dirty. I won't touch you. As he spoke, he looked around and said, we have to find a place to wash up and change our clothes. It's so uncomfortable to be covered in mud. There's the sound of flowing water in front. Follow me. Chen Dao said and led them forward. Fengjiu followed behind unhurriedly. She had the urge to sneak away, but she also knew that if she disappeared, no one else would look for her, but Chen Dao would. But if she directly told him that she wanted to act on her own, what excuse could she use? Even if she said it, he probably wouldn't agree. After all, in his eyes, she was only a cultivator of the foundation establishment stage. So troublesome. She sighed helplessly. She could only keep walking with them, hoping that they would go straight into the depths. Perhaps there would be a chance to encounter her mother. Chapter 1429. The spring water is rather cold in the middle of the night. I'll wash my face to refresh myself. Fengjiu said as he arrived at the mouth of the spring. 2 torches were inserted into the ground to illuminate the surroundings. The men had already begun to take off their muddy outer clothes. Just as they were about to take off their pants, they couldn't help but pause as if they had just remembered something. They also seemed to have sensed that someone was looking at them, so they raised their heads to look. Take it off, why aren't you taking it off? We're watching. 2 female alchemists stood at the side and stared at them. Their clothes were stained with mud and water and clung tightly to their bodies, outlining their exquisite and graceful figures. Fengjiu couldn't help but smile when he heard this. He glanced at the 2 women and then retreated to sit under a tree not far away. You 2 go wash up first. Hurry, don't take too long. Chen Dao said as he gestured for the 2 women to go wash up by the spring. He then said to the male alchemists, men, retreat 10 meters away and turn your backs. Seeing this, the alchemists could only endure the discomfort of their clothes sticking to their bodies and retreat 10 meters away to wait. Between men and women, the men definitely had to give way to the women. This was a form of courtesy and also a form of cultivation. Seeing this, the 2 women looked at each other. One of them guarded while the other changed first. Because they were in the forest and there were men 10 meters away, they didn't dare to wash for too long. After simply washing off the mud on their bodies and changing out of their dirty clothes, they quickly put on clean clothes. It's done. The 2 women said as they went to the side and used their spiritual energy to dry their hair. Under the night sky, the 2 women's figures were voluptuous and their faces were alluring. They stood under the tree and gently stroked their hair under the moonlight, causing the men to stare at them in a daze. Io! One of them didn't pay attention to his feet and tripped on a rock. He pathetically fell to the ground, causing the men beside him to regain their senses and stabilize their minds. The man who fell smiled embarrassedly at the 2 women and quickly stood up to go to the spring. Fengjiu glanced at those people with a strange expression and then looked away. About an hour later, everyone finished washing their clothes. Fengjiu, who was waiting under the tree, had already taken a nap. She only woke up when she heard Chen Dao's voice. After changing into clean clothes, Chen Dao walked over and saw Fengjiu sleeping there. Even his head was tilted to one side. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. This kid, he fell asleep just like that. Senior brother Chen, should we continue or rest here for the night? A man asked. In fact, he wanted to stay and rest for the night. After all, he had made enough trouble here. Then let's rest. We'll leave at dawn. Chen Dao said as he took out a robe and wanted to put it on Fengjiu. Unexpectedly, when he approached, Fengjiu woke up with the robe in his hand. The moment he opened his eyes, the vigilance and coldness in his eyes shot out. Chen Dao couldn't help but be startled, as if he was frightened. Senior brother Chen. What's wrong? Fengjiu, who woke up, asked. Seeing Qin Dao take a step back with the robe in his hand, he couldn't help but be startled and didn't react. Chapter 1430. Only the heavens knew that he was caught off guard by Fengjiu's sudden opening of her eyes. His heart was beating rapidly, and if he hadn't held back his scream, he would have lost his composure in front of everyone. Cough. He coughed lightly with one hand clenched into a fist and thought to himself, if that's really the case, it'll really damage my image. However, the sharpness and coldness in this brat's eyes when he opened his eyes was astonishing. That vigilance was really strong, and it didn't seem like something a foundation establishment cultivator would have. No need, no need. I only took a short nap, and I have clothes too. She smiled and squinted her eyes. She looked at everyone and asked, are we resting here tonight? And, let's rest first. As he spoke, he walked forward and sat down beside Fengjiu. However, just as he sat down, Fengjiu jumped up. What's wrong? Qin Dao was startled as he looked at Fengjiu, who suddenly stood up. Senior brother Chen, look, it's the ghost grass. She pointed at the 2 stalks of ghost grass that appeared again, and her eyes shone brightly. Qin Dao glanced at it, and indeed, the ghost grass appeared again. However, he wasn't interested and said, this thing is too difficult to catch, and can't be picked. It's better to save some energy and rest. The other alchemists also noticed it, and when they thought of the loss they suffered because of the ghost grass, they were all tempted, but they didn't make a move. They knew their limits, and they couldn't pick these 2 stalks of ghost grass. If they didn't do it well, even they would be implicated, so forget it. Senior brother, you don't want it either. Fengjiu squinted her eyes and asked those people with a smile. Hearing this, Qin Dao glanced at her and revealed a smile. From what you're saying, could it be that you want to go and pick it? If you have the ability to pick it, I can help you refine any kind of pill you need as long as you gather the ingredients. Pfft. Those alchemists sneered and glanced at Fengjiu with contempt. You can catch the ghost grass that we can't even pick. You're overestimating yourself. Hee, since you don't want it, then I'll go catch it. She ignored their disdain and walked towards the 2 ghost grass not far away with a grin on her face. Seeing this, everyone who was resting on the spot no longer felt sleepy. Each and every one of them stared at that green figure, wanting to see how this brat would make a fool of himself. Who would have thought that he would take out a fishing net from his qianquan bag? Everyone was stunned for a moment and had strange expressions on their faces. They watched as he walked forward with light steps and stared at the 2 stalks of ghost grass that were separated by a distance. Then, he prepared to make his move. His net covered one of the stalks. Ah! Someone exclaimed and stood up. His eyes widened as he stared ahead with an excited expression. We caught him. Yes, he did. Fengjiu looked at the ghost grass in the net and laughed. She was familiar with the growth characteristics of the ghost grass, so she took out a thin string and tied it to one of the ghost grass before letting it go. The other stalk moved forward lightly and maintained a close distance. In the next moment, Fengjiu used the net again and easily caught the other stalk, directly putting the 2 stalks of ghost grass into the space. Chapter 1431. When Qin Dao saw this, he was very surprised. He felt that Fengjiu's skills were very thought-provoking. They couldn't catch the ghost grass, but he only used a net to catch it. That kind of ease was really a slap in the face. Look at him, look, he's not even 20 years old yet. And he's only an odd job worker, not even an alchemist. Yet he easily did what you couldn't do. Tell me, don't you feel ashamed? Hearing Qin Dao's words, Fengjiu's mouth twitched. She put away the net and walked back, only to see an alchemist in front of her. I'll give you pills in exchange for the 2 ghost grass. Looking at the person in front of her, Fengjiu smiled and shook her head, I won't exchange. She still planned to plant the 2 ghost grass in her space. The ghost grass was a necessary ingredient for many kinds of pills. Adding it to different prescriptions would have different effects. She didn't want to give up the 2 ghost grass. Before the alchemist finished speaking, he was pushed away by Qingdao. He staggered back a few steps before stabilizing himself. Seeing it was Qingdao, he couldn't help but angrily shout, "Qingdao, what are you doing?" Qingdao crossed his arms and looked at him. "I'm the one who wants to say what you want to do. Don't you feel ashamed? Do you think he has to exchange the herbs he picked with you? If you keep pestering him to exchange for the ghost grass, do you believe that I'll kick you back into the mud?" Choked by these words, the alchemist could only glare at Fengjiu. Pursing his lips, he turned around and sat down under the tree. However, the arrogant alchemist couldn't swallow this anger. Qingdao glanced at the alchemist, snorted, and said to Fengjiu, "Keep your things well. If they dare to cause trouble for you, come find me. You're under my protection. If they dare to have ideas about you, then they're having ideas about me." Hearing this, Fengjiu grinned, "Thank you, Senior Chen. All right. Hurry up and rest. We have to continue our journey at dawn." He waved his hand and found a place to sit down and rest. This time, Fengjiu leaped onto the tree and fell asleep. She leaned against the tree and looked down at the people below. The corners of her lips curled up. Just as she was about to close her eyes, she saw Luo Heng also leaping up and sitting on the tree not far away. "Hey, Fengjiu, why do you have a net with you? Why don't you take it out?" Fengjiu glanced at him and said with a smile, "In the past, it was used to catch fish. Normally, I would use it to catch wild animals. This time, I can use it to catch spiritual herbs. How about selling it to me? I don't want your ghost grass. I want your net. I'll exchange it with pills. No, I still need to use it." She closed her eyes and ignored him. Sigh. "I'm going to sleep. Senior brother Luo, it's impossible to sell it to you, but I can lend it to you. As for this, we'll talk about it when I wake up tomorrow." Hearing this, Luo Heng smiled, "All right then." He would use it even if she borrowed it. With that net, there was no need to worry about not being able to catch the ghost grass. The next morning, everyone woke up to the chirping of birds and insects. Looking at the golden rays of the sun shining on the forest, the morning air was incomparably fresh. The tranquil and beautiful feeling made their mood suddenly brighten. Chapter 1432. The group walked into the forest. As they entered the inner area, they saw all kinds of spiritual herbs growing everywhere. Some grew in the weeds, some grew in the open, and some grew in the cracks of rocks. Fengjiu happily gathered the spiritual herbs in the back. She found that the deeper they went, the higher the quality of the spiritual herbs. Aside from her, the others also began to gather spiritual herbs that were useful to them. The 10 of them spread out, so there was no conflict. A few days later, Qingdao and the others were resting in the forest. Fengjiu was gathering spiritual herbs in the surroundings. When she put a stalk of submerged ground grass into her universe pouch, she saw a pair of boots appear in front of her. Faintly, she saw a gorgeous skirt. She was startled and raised her head to look. When she saw the person in front of her, a smile appeared on her face. Senior Marshal Sister. Wasn't the person in front of her one of the 2 women? Did she need something from her? Junior Marshal Brother Feng. As soon as the delicate voice came out, a pair of white and slender fingers were already on Fengjiu's shoulder. They gently rubbed back and forth. A pair of beautiful eyes stared at Fengjiu with an inexplicable meaning. Fengjiu's body stiffened. She stood there as if she didn't know what to do. She awkwardly smiled and said, "Senior Marshal Sister, what are you doing?" Although this woman looked to be in her 20s, her strength was definitely higher than that. She actually had the nerve to make a move on a young grass like her. She was too ruthless. Junior Marshal Brother Fong, you've gathered so many herbs yet you don't know how to refine them. How about I take a loss and refine them for you? Hee, there's no need. Senior Marshal Brother Chen said he would refine them for me. When the woman's hand lightly touched her chest, she foolishly smiled and quickly retreated a few steps. Seeing the retreating youth, the woman covered her mouth and smiled. Just as she was about to step forward again, she saw him suddenly call out in surprise behind her, Senior Marshal Brother Chen. Hearing those words, her heart jumped. Thinking it was Chen Dao, she quickly turned around. Who knew that there wasn't even a shadow behind her? When she turned around again, the youth had already disappeared. Pfft, little brat. She snorted and flicked her finger. Then, she turned around and walked back. Seeing Feng Jiu rushing over, Chen Dao, who was chatting with Luo Heng, asked, "Did you call me just now? I think I heard your voice." "Oh, yes, I did." Feng Jiu came to their side and said with a smile, "I want to ask if we're going to continue walking inside." "Oh, this." Chen Dao stroked his mustache and said, "Actually, the higher-ups have instructed that we can only walk around the outer and inner regions. As for the deeper regions..." He hesitated and said, "Although there are extremely precious spirit herbs in the deeper regions, there are also some ferocious spirit herbs and guardian beasts. The sect actually doesn't recommend us to enter the deeper regions." Feng Jiu's eyes lit up as he asked, "Then are we going in?" Her mother should be inside. Since they were already here, if they didn't go in, she wanted to go in and take a look. "You want to go in?" Seeing his anticipation, Chen Dao was a little surprised. "You don't know how to refine pills. Even if you gather those spirit herbs, you can only sell them. What's more, I said before, there are powerful spirit beasts and fierce beasts inside. For alchemists like us who specialize in alchemy, it's not suitable to go in." Chapter 1433. I don't agree with you going in. Chen Dao said directly, "You're not strong enough and it's dangerous for you to go in. Besides, we've already gathered a lot of spirit herbs and we're looking for a place to refine pills. Senior Brother Chen, you guys go ahead and refine the pills. I'll go take a look. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." Feng Jiu said. Just as he was about to say something else, he heard a loud bang. Bang! Bang bang bang! What's that sound? Everyone was shocked and quickly stood up to look around. The sound came from the air and they couldn't tell where it came from. Feeling the ground shake, Feng Jiu paused and said, "It might be a giant bear." "How do you know?" Luo Heng looked at him and asked. "The sound is very heavy and rhythmic. Only a giant bear can make such a sound and the ground is shaking. This giant bear must be very big and must be at least a holy beast." Bang! Bang bang bang! It's coming from there. She pointed to the depths of the forest. It's getting closer and closer. It's a giant bear. She took a deep breath and leaped onto a branch. Looking down from above, she could vaguely see a giant brown bear running out from there. Its speed was frighteningly slow, but it was fast. This is a holy beast peak giant bear. Senior Brother Chen, quickly take them away from there. Feng Jiu shouted and pointed to the other side. Hearing this, Chen Dao frowned and asked, "What about you? You don't want to leave? Now is not the time to play. Quickly come down and leave with us." Feng Jiu stood on the tree and looked down at him with a smile. "Senior Brother Chen, thank you. But I have to stay. I'll stay and stall for time. I'll lead this giant bear to another direction so that you have enough time to escape." Hearing this, Chen Dao said, "It's just a giant bear. I have medicine in my space. Just one pill will be enough to make the giant bear lie down." Feng Jiu shook his head. "It's useless to deal with such a giant brown bear. Moreover, this one is already at the peak of the holy beast level and is only a step away from becoming a holy beast. Those pills won't have any effect on it. Quickly leave. Let's go. If he wants to stay, then let him stay. Let's run for our lives. An alchemist said, and hurriedly ran in the direction Fengjiu had pointed. That's right, let's go. We're not as strong as you guys. If you don't leave, we'll leave. The rest of the people also quickly ran away, leaving only Luo Heng and the two female alchemists there. Senior brother Chen, let's go. Luo Heng said. After glancing at Fengjiu, he also turned around and left. The two female alchemists saw Fengjiu standing on the tree and not leaving. They couldn't help but be a little surprised, but they didn't say anything and left with everyone. Be careful. Chen Dao glanced at Fengjiu and reminded him, if you encounter any danger inside, try to avoid it. The people from the south will automatically be teleported out when the time is up. If you really enter the depths and can't come out, just find a place to stay and protect your life. Hearing this, Fengjiu's eyes moved slightly and he smiled, I know. Senior brother Chen, quickly go. We'll meet in the sect. At that time, I'll catch a bamboo spirit rat and bring some wine to you. Chapter 1434. Seeing them leave quickly, Fengjiu retracted her gaze and looked at the brown bear. In the next moment, she leaped towards the brown bear. Come here. She stepped on the giant bear's shoulder with the tip of her foot and led the brown bear deeper into the forest. Roar! The giant bear was stepped on and roared angrily as it chased after Fengjiu. At this moment, Fengjiu noticed that there was a sleeve arrow stuck in the back of the brown bear. The sleeve arrow was black and shiny and looked like it was poisonous. However, she was puzzled. If it was poisonous, why didn't the brown bear fall down? Roar! Bang, bang, bang! The giant bear's roars were accompanied by loud bangs as it ran through the forest. When the people who had already gone to the other side saw that Fengjiu did not follow them, they could not help but have different expressions. Fengjiu, Luo Heng looked at Chen Dao and asked, do we really not need to bring him back? No need, let him go. He's a strange person. He'll be fine. Chen Dao waved his hand and said to everyone, let's find a place to rest for a few days. If you want to pick herbs, you can go to another area. If you want to refine pills, you can also find a place to do so. What do you all think? When everyone heard this, they looked at each other and nodded, okay. Let's do that. Thus, under Chen Dao's lead, they went to the other side. Fengjiu, who was going deeper into the forest, saw a stalk of spiritual medicine and stopped in the middle of the journey. At this moment, the brown bear that was chasing behind her pounced over with a roar. It revealed its sharp claws and fiercely clawed at her. A few wind blades slashed out with a whoosh and left deep marks on the ground. TSK, TSK. You can't be so angry. Be careful. You'll destroy my spiritual medicine. Fengjiu put away the spiritual medicine she picked and shook her head as she spoke to the brown bear. After avoiding it, she looked at it from head to toe. Are you male or female? She leaped up and sat on a big tree. She rubbed her chin with one hand and stared at the brown bear below. Her pair of smart and cunning eyes rolled around as if she was thinking of something. Roar! The brown bear roared and pounced forward, but it couldn't reach the tree. It couldn't help but hug the tree and shake it violently, trying to shake the humans off. Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle from the tree. Your intelligence is limited. Can you shake me down like this? She sat among the branches and chuckled. She glanced down at the belly of the giant bear and chuckled. So it's a female bear. Tell me, how could there be such a coincidence? I have a male at home. Why don't you come back with me and be my little black's partner? Her eyes were shining as she spoke. The more she looked at it, the more she felt that it was feasible. This brown bear was of the same breed as her family's little black, but compared to her family's little black, this one's rank was higher. It was about to step into the level of a divine beast. If she took it back, perhaps little black would be very happy to see it. She was looking for companions for her beasts and pets. Roar, roar. The female bear roared angrily and slammed into the tree. The branches of the tree shook from the impact and leaves flew everywhere. Fengjiu was still sitting on the tree, but the female bear with the arrow in her back was gradually losing strength. Roar. Chapter 1435. Hey! She called out from the top of the tree, broke off a branch and threw it down. Seeing that the female bear was lying motionless, she jumped down from the tree. Just as she was about to pull out the arrow from its back, she saw the female bear suddenly raise its head and pounce on her. Roar! Who? Too treacherous. She let out a soft cry and quickly retreated, avoiding the female bear's attack. Seeing the hatred and anger in the bear's eyes, she knew that she had been angered. I wasn't the one who hurt you, so there's no point in getting angry at me. She waved her hand and sighed, I'll help you pull out the arrow from your back. Even if you can withstand the poison, it's not good to have the arrow stuck there, right? Roar, roar. Alright, stop shouting. Do you really think I can't beat you? She rolled her eyes and glanced at the female bear. In the next moment, she held 2 silver needles between her fingers and her lips curled up, revealing a sly smile. For my Xiao Hei, I'll take you in. As soon as his voice fell, 2 silver needles shot out and pierced into the female bear that was about to pounce on him. The female bear let out a long howl and her entire body fell forward. Pine. Seeing the female bear fall down powerlessly, Fengjiu chuckled and went forward, how is it? I didn't lie to you, right? You really aren't my match. She came to the female bear's back and checked the wound. Then she slightly knitted her brows, this kind of arrow has a barb. If I pull it out like this, I'll be able to tear out a piece of flesh. TSK, I really don't know what kind of person would use an arrow, but to use this kind of barb. While saying this, she took out a dagger. Since she couldn't pull it out directly, she could only cut open the wound a bit to take out the arrow. It was a good thing that she had anesthetics. After applying anesthetics to the wound, she began. After about half an incense stick's worth of time, a sleeve arrow stained with blood was taken out. Fengjiu applied some medicine and bandaged it. Then, she cleaned her hands and gave a pill to the brown bear. She then removed the 2 silver needles that were shot into the brown bear's body. All right. She took a few steps back and asked with a smile, did you eat something to detoxify the poison? Otherwise, how could he not be poisoned? Could it be that there are herbs in this forest that can cure hundreds of poisons? She thought about it and felt that it was very likely. Roar. The brown bear growled. Although it was on guard, it lowered its growl when it saw that Fengjiu did not make any further moves. It lay there without moving until its strength recovered. Then, it jumped and ran quickly into the forest. Hey, you're leaving just like that? Fengjiu stared and shouted, I really have a Xiao Hei in my house. It's the same kind as you. Roar. The only response she got was a roar. Then, even the sound of running footsteps became distant. Seeing this, she could only shake her head, get up, and rush into the forest. It was more important to find her mother. She wondered what kind of spirit herbs 3 Yangtze had asked her to pick. One had to know that the more precious a spirit herb was, the more dangerous it was. She went in alone. Did she encounter any danger? In the evening, when she smelled the smell of blood in the air, she stopped and rushed towards the place where the smell of blood was coming from. Chapter 1436. Seeing that they were from her sect, she walked out. What happened to you? Did you encounter a ferocious beast? The sudden voice gave the 10 of them a fright. Some of them instinctively jumped up and tore their wounds. Some of them cried out in surprise and lost their composure. When they saw the green figure that walked out, all of them widened their eyes. Who are you? Oh, I'm also from Danyang's sect, but I'm from 3 Yang Peak. She froze for a moment, then grinned foolishly. One of the alchemists frowned and stared at Fengjiu. You're from Danyang's sect. How did a foundation establishment cultivator come in? I remember now. He was brought in by Qindao. At that time, I saw him beside Qindao, so I'm sure he's a servant from 3 Yang Peak. The alchemist on the other side said. Seeing that it was someone from their sect and that he knew her, he could not help but secretly sigh in relief. It was fine as long as he was sure she would not be a threat to them. Did you encounter a ferocious beast? Why are all of you injured? She asked curiously. These people were golden core cultivators, and one of them was even a nascent soul cultivator. How did they end up in such a sorry state? Could it be that these alchemists only cultivated their spiritual power and not their combat strength? It was really a waste of their strength. What does it have to do with you? One of the alchemists said as he applied medicine to his wound. However, his hand was injured, and after applying medicine, it was not easy to bandage it. Thus, he shouted to Fengjiu, "Come over and help me bandage my wound." When she heard those matter-of-fact words and saw that none of those people wanted to answer her question, it was obvious that they disdained to answer a part-time disciple like her. Seeing this, she smiled and said, "But this has nothing to do with me." When everyone heard this, they were stunned for a moment, then became furious. You're just a servant. We let you bandage our wounds because we think highly of you. Fengjiu waved her hand. No need, no need. It's true that I'm a servant, but I didn't come here to bandage your wounds. She chuckled and said, You're all alchemists. Can't you just bandage each other's wounds? Why do you need the help of a lowly handyman like me? Hearing Fengjiu's words, everyone's expression changed slightly. Seeing that the odd job worker really didn't come forward to help, their faces darkened. They secretly thought that this odd job worker was too impudent. When they returned to the sect, they would definitely teach him a lesson. Roar! Suddenly, a wolf howl sounded, followed by a series of wolf howls. Hearing the wolf howls, the faces of the 10 injured alchemists changed, and they stood up one after another. It's a wolf pack. It's a wolf pack. What should we do? Looking at their pale faces, Fengjiu leisurely leaned against a tree and said, It must be a pack of wolves. You have blood on you, and the smell of blood is so strong that I can smell it from a few hundred meters away. What's more, those wolves who love to eat human flesh and blood. Hearing Fengjiu's words, someone panicked. Let's go. Quickly leave this place, let's go outside. They would only be safe if they left this place and went to the outside. At this moment, he really regretted it. He shouldn't have thought of coming in to pick some precious spiritual herbs. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation. Roar! The wolf howls were getting closer and closer, as if they were coming from the direction of a half-circle. The 10 alchemists wanted to go outside, but when they heard the wolf howls, they broke out in cold sweat and stopped in their tracks. Chapter 1437. Fengjiu leaned against a tree and crossed her arms as she looked at the panicked crowd with a strange expression. All right, she felt that these alchemists were too afraid of death. Actually, if it was someone else with a golden core cultivation level, even if they only cultivated spiritual power and did not have any fighting strength, they would not be at a loss like this. However, when these people heard the wolf howl, they felt like they were about to die under the claws of the wolves. If they did not even have the will to fight, how could they have the ability to fight? What do we do? What do we do? Oh, right, climb up the tree, quickly climb up the tree. Seeing them jump up the tree in a hurry, she could not help but grin. Some of the wolves here know how to climb up the tree. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw that they all froze and stared at each other speechlessly. Howl! The wolves howled again, and this time, several wolves appeared 10 meters away. Each of them was more than a meter tall and had gray fur. Their mouths were slightly open, revealing sharp fangs. Saliva dripped from their mouths as they stared at them with ferocious and bloodthirsty eyes. The wolves are here. The alchemists' faces turned pale. Some of them held their swords in their hands, but they could not help but tremble. Fighting, as honorable alchemists, this kind of vulgar thing was disdained by them. They might be able to deal with weaker cultivators, but against these bloodthirsty and ferocious wolves, just looking at them made their hearts tremble. How could they still have the strength to fight? Looking at the pale faces of the people on the tree and under the tree, Fengjiu grinned. Fellow alchemists, although I'm an odd job worker, I'm still a foundation establishment cultivator. Furthermore, I'm not good at alchemy, but I specialize in martial arts, so it's more than enough to deal with these wolves. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Their eyes were filled with surprise as they looked at Fengjiu. Really? Of course. She raised her chin and said. Then hurry up and chase the wolves away. Hearing this, Fengjiu chuckled. It's really not difficult to chase the wolves away, but this is a matter of working for free. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and said, if you chase the wolves away, each of us will give you a bottle of pills. Pills? No, no. She shook her head. I don't want pills. She had her own pills, why would she want theirs? What's more, she might not even fancy their medicinal pills. No. Everyone was stunned. You don't want the pills we gave you? Are you stupid? Do you know how precious our medicinal pills are? Sure enough, he was just a servant. If he didn't even want medicinal pills, then what did he want? If you don't want pills, then what do you want? Someone asked in surprise. Gold, silver, jewels, jade, and treasures are fine, but I don't want things like pills. She grinned and asked, do you have the things I mentioned? When everyone heard this, they all had strange expressions on their faces. You really want gold, silver, and jewelry? Yes. She nodded in response. Then you chase the wolf pack away first. We'll give it to you after this. One of the alchemists said. Unexpectedly, Fengjiu chuckled. That's fine. The wolves haven't even gotten close yet. I think it's better for me to collect the gold, silver, and jewelry first before chasing the wolves away. This way, I can be braver and risk my life, right? But in this situation, how can we take it out? This is inconvenient. Chapter 1438. Under Fengjiu's smiling gaze, the alchemist could only untie his qianquan bag and take out some gold coins or precious stones to hand over to him. Seeing Fengjiu take the items and stuff them into his qianquan bag, the alchemist's eyes twitched and he asked, is this enough? If he continued to take them out, he would be completely defrauded. It's about enough. Fengjiu nodded, his eyes narrowed into a smile as he patted the alchemist's shoulder. Don't worry, with me here, you definitely won't be missing an arm or a leg. Hearing this, the alchemist's mouth twitched. He watched as the youth tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and leaped to another alchemist to receive his so-called reward. Everyone took out gold coins and precious stones to give to him, but there were also a few who were unwilling. They stared suspiciously at Fengjiu and said, you alone can chase away the pack of wolves. Don't joke around, you have to think carefully. If you cheat us, you won't be able to finish eating when we return. A wolf howl was heard as one of the gray wolves fiercely pounced on the tree trunk, causing the tree to shake violently. The alchemist who was standing on the tree did not have a firm footing and was hit by the wolf, causing him to slip and fall down. He fell on the back of the wolf and rolled to the side. He was so shocked that his face turned pale and he screamed out involuntarily. Ah! Help! Awo! Hiss! When the other alchemists on the tree saw this scene, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their faces were deathly pale as they hugged the tree branches tightly to prevent themselves from falling down. Especially when they saw that the alchemist had fallen down the tree. Other than the giant wolf that was pouncing on him, there were a few other horses that fiercely rushed out from not far away and pounced on the alchemist. Standing on the tree and hugging the tree branches tightly, they could almost see the alchemist being torn to pieces in the next moment. When they thought of that scene, their bodies trembled and their legs went weak. They couldn't help but squat down. Unlike them, Fengjiu quickly turned around when she heard the commotion behind her. At the same time, she jumped down and raised her hand. A sharp cold light flashed in front of everyone's eyes. In the next moment, there was a blood-curdling scream and blood spurted out, splattering all over the ground. Ah! The alchemist who had fallen down the tree screamed in horror. Seeing the giant wolf pouncing on him, he closed his eyes and didn't dare to open them. Until his face was splashed with warm blood, he was startled and he instantly opened his eyes. What he saw was a green figure holding a blood-stained dagger standing in front of him. And the giant wolf's corpse, over a meter-long wolf's carcass that was over a meter-long wolf's body that was over 1 meter-long wolf's carcass over. He's dead. The alchemist fell to the ground with the wolf's corpse on top of him. He could only see blood in front of his eyes and was at a loss. What are you still? Quickly go up. Fengjiu kicked away the giant wolf's carcass and picked up the alchemist who was lying limp on the ground. Using her strength, she threw him up the tree. Ah! The alchemist cried out in shock and quickly hugged the tree branches tightly. He stared blankly at the green figure below. The other people on the tree were the same. They only saw the green figure shuttling through the pack of wolves, raising his dagger and slashing it down. The glint of the dagger was blood red and the murderous aura was threatening. Chapter 1439. Awo. The stimulation of the wolf's blood caused the nature of the wolves to be even more aroused. With a savage howl, the sharp wolf claws slashed out like sharp blades, leaving a few deep claw marks on the tree trunks. As the corpses of the giant wolves on the ground increased, the people on the tree couldn't help but swallow their saliva, their eyes filled with shock and fear. The youth who was circling the pack of wolves was reaping the lives of the ferocious beasts like a god of death. It was so easy and effortless that they could not even see a single wound on his body. The blood that splattered on his green robes was all the blood of the giant wolves. A long wolf howl sounded. The remaining 7 to 8 giant wolves stared at Fengjiu unwillingly as they bared their teeth and howled. In the end, they could only retreat quickly after that long howl. Fengjiu's gaze swept around and saw the Wolf King standing in the distance. After glancing at the Wolf King, he retracted his gaze and squatted down to dig out the beast crystals of the giant wolves. At this moment, the 10 alchemists on the tree saw that the crisis had been averted and each of them let out a sigh of relief. They looked at each other and then uncomfortably came down from the tree. They tidied their robes and tried their best to maintain the noble bearing that alchemists should have. However, each of them were in a sorry state and their faces were deathly pale. Some of them were even trembling slightly. No matter how one looked at them, they didn't have the slightest bit of composure. It was only because they were trying their best to hold on that they looked a little comical. After keeping the beast crystals, Fengjiu turned and walked towards the 2 people behind him. He stretched out his hand in front of them and revealed a harmless smile, saying, "You haven't given me yours yet." The 2 people paused for a moment. Thinking of how ferocious he was when he killed the wolves, their hearts trembled. They hurriedly took out a corresponding amount of gold coins or precious stones and placed them in Fengjiu's hands. Seeing Fengjiu weighing the weight of the items in his hands, the 2 hurriedly said, "We only have these. We don't really need gold coins to enter the secret territory, so we really don't have that much." However, we still have some pills, do you want them? After saying this, not only did the people beside him feel strange, even the two people who were talking felt very strange, and their expressions became strange. In the past, it was others who begged them to give them pills or sell them some pills. This was the first time they had asked a young odd job worker if he wanted their pills. Moreover, it was free. This feeling was really strange. Forget it. Although we're not from the same peak, we're still from the same sect. I won't bicker with you. She smiled and put away the things in her hands. Then, she said to them, hurry up and go to the periphery. There aren't just giant wolves in the depths of this place. If you're really surrounded, you'll lose your life. Don't throw away your life for some spirit herbs that you haven't even seen. Looking at these alchemists who were being taught a lesson by her like children, Fengjiu suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and cleared his throat. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. In the future, I'll have to ask you all to take care of me in the sect. When everyone heard this, they were stunned for a moment, then hurriedly said, of course, of course. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.